I'm Elijah Vance, 75 years old, and I am, or perhaps was, a father. I stood at the entrance to the grand ballroom holding a small wedding gift. My own daughter Chloe blocked the doorway, her face tight with annoyance. "Dad," she hissed, "you can't be here. You're not on the guest list. You're embarrassing me in front of Brad's friends. Please just go away." I quietly left. 2 hours later, as they were cutting the cake, the manager shut down the music. Every payment for that $100,000 wedding was canceled. No me, no wedding. Before I tell you how I did it and the terrible truth I uncovered about my new son-in-law, I want to know where you're listening from. Let me know in the comments. And hit that like button if you believe that respect for your elders isn't just a suggestion. It's a requirement. It all started that Saturday morning in my row house in West Baltimore. The house is small, but the bricks are solid. I've lived here for 45 years. I was getting ready. I pulled out my best suit, the dark gray one I'd worn to my wife's funeral 10 years ago. It still fit, maybe a little looser now. I'm 75, a retired postman. You don't get heavy-lifting mailbags for 40 years. I struggled with the necktie. My fingers aren't what they used to be. "Just need to look sharp for our girl, Rosie," I mumbled to the empty room. I looked at the photograph on my dresser. My wife, Rosalind. She was beautiful with a smile that could disarm kings. And in a way, she came from kings, at least Baltimore royalty. Her family had old money, the kind that whispers, not shouts. I was just Eli the mailman who delivered to her neighborhood. I never understood what she saw in me, but she said I was real. She said I was the only honest man she'd ever met. When she got sick, she made me promise. We were in this very room. She was frail, but her eyes were still sharp. "Eli," she whispered, grabbing my hand. "The money, it's all going into the trust for Chloe. But I'm not putting the bank in charge. I'm putting you in charge." I told her that was crazy. I was a postman. What did I know about managing millions? Rosalind shook her head. "That's why I trust you. You don't care about the money. You only care about her. Don't let the money spoil her, Eli. Don't let it break her. Protect our girl." I promised I would. For 10 years I kept that promise. I lived simply on my own pension. I never touched the trust. I wanted Chloe to find her own way to learn the value of a dollar earned. But then, 2 years ago, Brad Covington walked into her life. Brad, a 40-year-old white man with $1 million smile shoes that cost more than my monthly mortgage and eyes that never stayed still. He was a financial consultant, he said. He specialized in private equity. He dripped money, or at least he dripped the look of money. I never trusted him. A postman spends his life reading people, not just addresses, and Brad Covington, his stamp was counterfeit. But Chloe was blinded by him. She was 40, successful in her own right, but she had always had that one vulnerability, that need to be seen as part of her mother's world. Brad promised her that world. I looked at the desk, at the authorization form I had signed 3 days ago. My signature, Elijah Vance, authorizing the trust's lawyer to wire $100,000 to the Sagamore Pendry Hotel. Chloe had begged me. She cried. "Dad, it's my dream wedding. It's what Mom would have wanted. Brad's family is coming from all over. It has to be perfect." I didn't like it. I told her it was too much, that Rosalind never would have spent that kind of money on a party. But she accused me of trying to control her, of not trusting her judgment. She said if I didn't approve the funds, she would know I never really loved her. So I signed. I betrayed my promise to Rosie because I couldn't bear the thought of my daughter hating me. I signed, feeling sick to my stomach. I tried to call Chloe one last time that morning. I wanted to hear her voice, maybe get one last reassurance that this was all real, that she was happy. Straight to voicemail, again. It had been like that all week, ever since the money transfer went through. "Chloe Bug," I said, leaving a message. "It's Dad. I'm just calling to say I'm on my way. I'm so proud of you. I hope you're happy, baby girl. I love you." I hung up, feeling a cold dread I couldn't shake. I looked back at Rosie's picture. "I'm sorry, Rosie," I whispered. "I think I messed up." I picked up the small gift from the table. It was just a simple old silver frame. Inside was the last photo taken of Rosalind before she got sick. I wanted Chloe to have it, to remember where she came from, to remember what real value looked like. I put the small box in my suit pocket, checked my reflection one last time, just an old man in an old suit, and walked out into the bright Baltimore morning to catch a taxi to the most expensive hotel in the city. I had no idea I was walking into my own execution. The taxi pulled up to the curb, and even the curb was fancy. It wasn't asphalt. It was polished cobblestone. The Sagamore Pendry. I'd delivered mail in this neighborhood, Fells Point, for 40 years. I'd seen this place built from the ground up, a palace of glass and old brick sitting right on the water, looking like it owned the whole harbor. I paid the driver and stepped out, clutching the small, neatly wrapped gift in my coat pocket. My name is Elijah Vance. I'm 75 years old, and I'm a retired postman. A doorman in a sharp coat with gold buttons nodded at me, but his eyes swept over my gray suit. It was my best suit, the one I'd worn to my wife's funeral 10 years ago, but he didn't see a guest. He saw a mistake. He saw someone who had wandered in from the wrong side of town. I almost told him, "Don't worry, son. I'm the one paying for all this." But I just nodded back and walked in. The inside was loud with silence. The ceilings were 2, maybe 3 stories high, all dark wood beams and iron chandeliers that dripped light like melting gold. The floor was marble so polished I could see my own worn shoes reflected in it. People glided past me, women in dresses that shimmered, men in suits that looked like they were sewn right onto their bodies. They weren't walking, they were floating. And everyone looked like they had never worried about a bill in their lives. I felt out of place, not just because I was one of the only black men in the room, but because I was a postman. This was a place built to make men like me feel small. And this is what $100,000 bought. I saw them across the lobby, standing near a grand staircase that was draped in white roses. Chloe, my daughter, she was breathtaking. Her white dress wasn't just a dress. It was a sculpture of lace and silk that must have cost a fortune. Her hair was pinned up with pearls. She was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, looking exactly like the princess her mother Rosie always knew she was. She looked just like her mother, and next to her was Brad. He was in his element. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him like a glove. He was slick easy, moving through the crowd, shaking hands, clapping men on the back. He looked like he owned the place. He looked like he owned her. My stomach tightened. I remembered the conversation 3 weeks ago. It wasn't Chloe who had asked for the money, not really. It was Brad. He had come to my house alone. He sat on my old comfortable sofa, the one Rosalind and I had bought together, and he looked out of place. He refused the coffee I offered. He was so smooth. "Dad, Eli," he'd said, calling me Dad in that way that always felt wrong, like a costume he was trying on. "This isn't just a wedding, Eli. It's a merger. The people attending, they are my future. They're my key investors. They need to see that Chloe comes from a background of quality, of substance." He put his hand on my shoulder, his touch light, dismissive. "This is a chance for your daughter to shine, Eli, to take her rightful place. It's what Rosalind would have wanted." He knew just where to stick the knife. Rosalind. He used my wife's memory to sell me on a party. He made it sound like I was failing her, failing Chloe, if I kept them tethered to my small, simple world. He painted my prudence as poverty, my humility as a weakness, and I fell for it. I, Elijah Vance, a 75-year-old man who'd seen every scam on the streets of Baltimore, fell for the oldest scam in the book, a con man promising my daughter the world using my own love as the weapon. So I walked toward them. I straightened my old tie. I was still her father. This was still her wedding day. The gift in my pocket, the old silver frame with Rosie's picture, felt heavy. I just wanted to give it to her, to see her smile, to remind her of real love, of real substance, before all this performance started. I was about 30 feet away. I raised my hand. "Chloe," I started to say. And then it happened. Brad saw me. It wasn't a slow recognition. It was instant. His smile didn't fade. It shattered. It was like a porcelain mask cracking in two. His eyes, which had been so warm and charming just seconds before, turned to ice. He saw my gray suit. He saw my worn shoes. He saw my black skin. He saw my old face. He didn't see a father-in-law. He saw a liability. He saw the postman. I watched him lean in his mouth, moving fast and urgent against Chloe's ear. He didn't even try to hide his panic. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the expensive lace. I watched my daughter. I saw her turn, looking for what had spooked her. She scanned the crowd, confused. And then she saw me. Her face. Her face didn't freeze like Brad's. It did something worse. It crumpled. The laughter vanished, replaced by annoyance. Pure, unfiltered irritation. She looked at me, then looked around the lobby, her eyes wide with embarrassment, checking to see if any of her new important friends had seen me. She didn't run to hug me. She didn't smile. She handed her champagne glass to Brad, hiked up her $100,000 dress with an angry sigh, and began walking quickly toward me. She wasn't walking to welcome me. She was walking to intercept me. She walked fast. Not the way a bride should walk, gliding on air. She walked like she was marching into a fight, her face tight with an emotion I couldn't place. It wasn't joy. It was annoyance. She didn't stop a few feet away or wait for me to speak. She stopped right in front of me, close enough that I could smell the expensive perfume I had paid for, blocking my path to the ballroom, blocking my path to her. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her voice was a sharp, angry whisper. It wasn't Dad like she used to say it, warm and full of love. It was Dad like an accusation, like finding a dog tracking mud in the kitchen. I fumbled with the small wrapped box in my suit pocket, the silver frame with Rosie's picture, my wife, her mother. I'm here for your wedding, Chloe. I brought a gift." She glanced around, her eyes wide with panic, checking to see if any of her new important friends were watching. She looked like I was a fire she needed to put out before the smoke spread. "You can't be here," she hissed. My mind just wouldn't catch up. The words didn't make sense. What do you mean I can't be here? I'm your father. It's your wedding day." "I told you," she said, her voice strained. "I told you we were just having a small ceremony. We sent out the invitations. You weren't on the list." A small ceremony. I looked over her shoulder, past the grand arches, into the ballroom. It was a sea of white roses and crystal. I saw a string quartet tuning their instruments. I saw at least 50 tables draped in silk, easily seating over 100 people. "Small?" I asked. My voice was quiet, confused. "Chloe, I signed the check. $100,000, you said, for your dream wedding. This isn't small." That's when he appeared, gliding up beside her like a shadow. Brad. He put his arm around her proprietary like he was calming a nervous racehorse. He looked immaculate in his tuxedo. He didn't look at me as a father-in-law. He looked at me as a problem. "Listen, Eli," he said. His voice was smooth, like oil, but cold. "There's been a slight change of plans, a miscommunication." He nodded toward the guests inside who were laughing and drinking champagne. "The people in there, they're my business partners, Eli. Big investors. They come from very prominent families, old money." He looked me up and down. His eyes swept over my dark gray suit, the suit Rosie had picked out for me 15 years ago. It was a good suit. It was my best suit. He continued, They wouldn't understand." I felt my blood run cold. I finally understood what this was about. I'd felt it the day he used Rosie's memory to get me to sign that check. Understand what Brad? Chloe's face crumpled. But it wasn't sadness. It was shame. Her shame. "They won't understand you, Dad." Her whisper was now a choked sob of pure hot anger. "Look at you. Just look at your suit. It's 20 years old. You're just a retired mailman." A retired mailman, there it was. The two words she used to sum up my entire life. 40 years of walking a route in the snow and the blistering heat. 40 years of carrying that heavy bag so she could have ballet lessons, so she could go to college, so she could stand there in a $100,000 dress and be ashamed of me. You're embarrassing me," she said, and I saw a tear finally roll down her cheek. But it was a tear of fury, not sadness. "I'm sorry," she said, and I knew she wasn't sorry at all. "I'm sorry, but you're not on the guest list. You need to go. Please, just go away. Go away." I just stood there. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't feel the gift in my hand. In that moment, the pain was worse than when I held Rosie's hand as she passed away. That was tragedy. That was God's will. This was betrayal. This was a choice. This was my daughter, the one I had raised, the one I had loved, looking me in the face and telling me I wasn't good enough, that my life's work made me trash. I looked past her, and my eyes locked with a woman standing by the grand staircase. She was older, sharp, dressed in a professional black suit. The hotel manager, Mrs. Davies. She had seen it. She had heard it all. She saw the way my daughter looked at me with disgust. She saw the way I stood there frozen. She didn't look away, and she didn't look pitying. She looked appalled. Not at me, at them. Brad was already steering Chloe back toward the party, his hand on her back, whispering in her ear, "It's okay, baby. It's handled. Just smile." Handled. I was just something to be handled, like a piece of trash left on the polished marble floor. I looked down at the small gift in my hand, Rosie's picture. I couldn't take it back home. It didn't belong in my house anymore. It belonged here in this cold, empty palace. I walked to a small, ornate table near the entrance, the one holding the guest book that I wasn't allowed to sign. I placed the gift on it. I didn't look back. I straightened my old tie. I smoothed the lapels of my dark gray suit. As I passed the manager, Mrs. Davies, I paused for just a second. "If anyone asks," I said, and I was proud that my voice came out clear and steady, "just tell them the mailman stopped by to drop off a package." I walked out of those grand doors. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My legs were shaking. It wasn't the cold December air. It was the humiliation. It was a cold so deep it settled right into my bones, a cold that 40 years of walking a mail route in Baltimore winters never gave me. 75 years old, and I felt like a child who had been publicly slapped. "Go away, Dad. You're embarrassing me." The words just kept playing in my head, a broken record, over and over. Embarrassing. A mailman. That's all I was to her. A walking embarrassment in an old suit. The doorman in the white gloves, the one who had looked at me like I was a mistake when I walked in. He looked at me again as I came out. This time I think he felt pity. That was worse. I felt the empty space in my suit pocket where the gift had been. The small silver frame with Rosie's picture. I had left it. I had left her in that cold place with those cold, shiny, empty people. My hands were trembling so hard I couldn't even think. I just fumbled in my pockets, needing something to do. A yellow taxi idled at the curb. The driver looked at me. "You okay, Pops?" I just nodded and pulled the door open, sliding onto the cracked vinyl seat. "Where to?" he asked, hitting the meter. I opened my mouth. I was going to say my address. Home. But the word got stuck in my throat. I couldn't go home. Not now. Home was the house I bought with Rosalind. Home was where I raised Chloe. Home was where I still saw her as a little girl running down the hall, her pigtails flying, laughing like she had invented joy. If I went home now, I would just sit in that old armchair, the one Rosie always said was mine, and I would just break. I would just come apart. "Just drive," I said, my voice hoarse. "Just head downtown, toward Charles Street." The driver shrugged. "You're nickel chief." He pulled away from the curb. I stared out the window, but I wasn't seeing the familiar streets. I was seeing Rosalind. 10 years ago in the hospital. The room smelled like antiseptic and fear. She was so thin, her beautiful strong hands were just bones wrapped in paper skin, but her eyes were still sharp, still full of that fire that I fell in love with all those years ago. She knew she was going. She grabbed my hand. Her grip was like steel. "Eli," she whispered, and I had to lean in close to hear her. "Listen to me." "I'm listening, Rosie. I'm right here." "The money," she said. "The trust." I tried to shush her, to tell her not to worry about that. "No," she insisted, her voice suddenly strong, angry. "You will listen. I'm leaving it all in the trust for Chloe. But I am not putting a bank in charge. I'm putting you in charge. You, Eli. You are the sole trustee." "Rosie, that's crazy," I'd argued. "What do I know about managing millions? I'm just a mailman." "That's why," she said, her eyes burning into mine, "because you're the only one who doesn't care about the money. You will protect her. Eli, our girl, she's wonderful, but she's weak. She has my family's ambition, but she doesn't have my strength. She craves the validation of shiny, empty people. And they will smell the money on her, Eli. They will circle her like sharks." She was coughing then, but she held my hand tighter. "Promise me, Eli. Promise me. If she chooses wrong, if she brings a wolf into our house, you protect her. You protect my legacy from her." I looked at my daughter, who was crying in the hallway, too young to understand, and I looked back at my wife, the love of my life. I promise, Rosie. I'll protect her. Rosalind had closed her eyes, a small sigh of relief. Good, she whispered. Protect her, even if it means protecting her from herself. The taxi was idling at a red light on Charles Street. Protect her from herself. I had just watched my daughter, my Chloe bug, throw me away like trash. I had just watched her stand there with the wolf Brad as he smirked. I had thought my promise to Rosie meant protecting Chloe's feelings, giving her what she wanted, signing the $100,000 check for a party. I was wrong. I was a fool. I hadn't been protecting her. I had been enabling her. I wasn't supposed to protect her. I was supposed to protect Rosie's legacy. I finally understood. My promise wasn't to make Chloe happy. It was to make sure she was worthy, and she had just proven she was not. The trembling in my hands stopped. A new feeling washed over me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. Cold, hard, and sharp as glass. I knew exactly what I had to do. I leaned forward. Stop here. Right by that tall glass building. This one, the driver asked. This is Hayes Hamilton and Associates. They ain't gonna let you just walk in, Pops. They will, I said. I paid the man, stepped out onto the sidewalk, and pulled out my old flip phone. My fingers didn't shake as I dialed the number. A number I knew as well as my own. It rang twice. A crisp voice answered, Hayes Hamilton and Associates. It's Elijah Vance, I said. I need to speak to Alistair. I'm sorry, sir, Mr. Hayes is in a meeting. You tell him it's Eli, I said, my voice low and hard. You tell him it's about Rosie's trust. You tell him right now. There was a click, a pause, and then that deep, familiar voice that I'd known for 60 years. Eli, what's wrong? You sound off. Alistair, I said, looking up at the 30 stories of glass and steel that held his office. Are you in? I am. I'm in a deposition, but I can... Leave it, I said. I need to see you, right now. I'm standing on your sidewalk. There was another pause. A heavy one. Alistair knew me. In 40 years of friendship, in 10 years of managing this trust, I had never, ever asked him to drop anything. What is it, Eli? I looked back in the direction of the hotel where my daughter was laughing, where the champagne I paid for was flowing, where my wife's picture was sitting on a table like an orphan. It's about Rosie's trust, I said. It's time to enforce the fine print. I sat in Alistair Hayes's office. The chair was deep, covered in soft black leather that probably cost more than my first car. Outside his window, 30 stories down, Baltimore bustled, but up here it was silent. The kind of silence that money buys. Thick carpets, walls lined with law books, a heavy mahogany desk. This was Alistair's world, not mine. My name is Elijah Vance, 75 years old. Alistair Hayes is 70. We grew up together in West Baltimore, throwing rocks at the same stray dogs. But our paths, they went different ways. I went to the post office. He went to Harvard. He became the sharpest lawyer in the state, a kingmaker. I became the mailman. But he was my best friend, the only man alive who knew the whole truth. He was the only one who understood that Rosalind, my Rosie, had come from old money, and I was the man she chose to trust. He was the only one who knew I wasn't just a retired postman. I was the sole trustee of a multi-million-dollar estate. He leaned back in his high-backed chair, his face unreadable. He had listened to my whole story without saying a word, his fingers steepled under his chin. He just listened. He let me tell him everything. The taxi ride, the way Brad looked at me, the way Chloe's voice cut me. Go away, Dad. When I finished my story, my voice was hoarse. I felt small, ashamed. I felt like I had failed Rosalind. Alistair just nodded slowly. He took off his gold-rimmed glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. So, he said, his voice a low rumble. It finally happened. I looked up. What do you mean? Alistair stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. Rosalind always worried this day would come. I warned her, Eli. I told her she was spoiling that girl, giving her everything. It doesn't teach them gratitude. It teaches them entitlement. He turned back to me, his eyes sharp. And I told you from the minute I met him that Brad Covington was a leech, a parasite. He didn't just smell money on Chloe, Eli. He smelled weakness. He smelled you. His words were hard, but they were true. She called me a mailman, I whispered, like it was dirt, like the 40 years I spent walking this city meant nothing. To people like them, Eli, it does mean nothing, Alistair said. All they see is the suit, not the man. They see your pension, not your character. They see you as a rusty old lock on a treasure chest, and they just brought the bolt cutters. They're going to sue, I said. Brad threatened it, said they'd prove I'm incompetent. Alistair actually laughed, a short, sharp, dangerous sound. Incompetent, he said, walking over to a massive fireproof safe built into the wall. Oh, Eli, they have no idea who they're dealing with. They have no idea who Rosalind was. He spun the dial, a series of precise clicks echoing in the quiet room. He opened the heavy door and pulled out a thick leather-bound document. It wasn't a copy, it was the original. The last will and testament of Rosalind Vance. He placed it on the desk between us with a heavy thud. These new money idiots like Brad, they think wills are simple. They think, I die, you get the money. They don't understand old money. Rosalind's family didn't just build wealth, Eli. They built fortresses. Alistair put his glasses back on. He opened the will, his fingers flipping past pages of legal text, past the allocations, past the standard clauses, until he stopped about halfway through. He turned the document around and pushed it toward me. I believe you've forgotten this part, he said. Rosalind and I. We spent a month drafting this specific section. She was very insistent. He pointed. Clause 12B. I call it the morality clause. I leaned forward. My eyes are not what they used to be. I squinted at the dense text. Alistair read it aloud for me, his voice clear and sharp as a razor. All disbursements from the Rosalind Vance Trust to the beneficiary Chloe Vance for significant life events, including but not limited to education, property acquisition, or matrimony, are subject to the final and absolute approval of the sole trustee, Elijah Vance. I know that part, Alistair, I said. That's how I approved the 100,000. You didn't let me finish, old friend, Alistair said. He tapped the next paragraph. Said approval is contingent upon the trustee's full and complete moral and ethical acceptance of the parties and circumstances involved. Should the beneficiary or any party acting in concert with the beneficiary be found to be acting in a manner that is deceptive, manipulative, or brings dishonor to the family name or the trustee has the sole and irrevocable power to immediately revoke any and all funds related to that event. The words hung in the air. Brings dishonor to the family name or the trustee. Go away, Dad. You're embarrassing me. I looked up from the page. I looked at Alistair. He had the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. She didn't just make you a guardian, Eli, Alistair said softly. She made you a judge. I felt the tremor in my hand stop. The cold dread that had filled me in the taxi was gone. It was replaced by something else, something heavy, something solid. Wait. They didn't just disrespect me, Alistair, I said. They disrespected my wife. They violated her trust. Yes, they did, Alistair agreed. Legally, what they did tonight constitutes a flagrant breach of Clause 12B. Eli, you have the full legal right now to pull back every single cent. The check you signed, we can stop payment. The wire transfer, we can claw it back. He leaned forward. You just have to give the word. I thought about Chloe's face twisted in anger. I thought about Brad's condescending smirk. I thought about my Rosie lying in that hospital bed trusting me. I thought about her money, her legacy paying for a party where her own husband was deemed too embarrassing to enter. I looked Alistair dead in the eye. Do it. Alistair Hayes did not hesitate. He didn't need to look up the number. He was the kind of man who had every important number memorized. My name is Elijah Vance, 75 years old, and I was about to watch a master at work. He picked up the heavy receiver of his desk phone, his movements precise, economical. There was no anger in his face, just a cold, professional focus. He pressed the speakerphone button. I heard the clicks of the numbers being dialed, then the faint electronic ringing. I sat there in that expensive leather chair, my hands resting on my knees. I was no longer shaking. The humiliation I felt at the hotel door, it was still there, a hard, cold stone in my gut. But it wasn't pain anymore. It was fuel. Sagamore Pendry Events Department, this is Mrs. Davies speaking. Her voice was crisp, professional. The same woman who had watched me be thrown out. The same woman who had seen the disgust on Chloe's face. Mrs. Davies, Alistair began, his voice smooth as polished wood but with an edge of absolute authority. This is Alistair Hayes of Hayes Hamilton and Associates. I am calling as chief counsel and legal representative for the Rosalind Vance Trust. He paused, letting the weight of his name and his firm settle into the silence. Mr. Hayes, she replied. I could hear the change in her tone. The professional crispness was still there, but now it was laced with curiosity, maybe even respect. How can I help you? I'm calling Mrs. Davies regarding the Covington wedding, event number 774B, the one currently in progress in your grand ballroom. Yes, of course, she said. A beautiful event. Beautiful indeed, Alistair said, his voice dripping with irony so subtle only I could catch it. I'm calling to inform you of a significant legal development. The Rosalind Vance Trust is the sole payer for this event, correct? That is correct, sir. We received a certified check for $100,000 authorized by the trustee. Authorized, Alistair repeated, under specific conditions. Conditions which have just been flagrantly violated by the beneficiaries Chloe Vance and Bradley Covington. I watched Alistair. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a general moving his pieces on the board. Mrs. Davies, he continued, I am officially informing you that as of this moment, 6:47 p.m., due to a severe breach of Clause 12B of the trust agreement, all payments from the Rosalind Vance Trust for this event are immediately and irrevocably revoked. The $100,000 check will be stopped by our bank first thing tomorrow morning. It will not be honored. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. A long, stunned silence. Mr. Hayes, did you say revoked? I did, entirely. The trust will not be paying for the champagne. We will not be paying for the string quartet. We will not be paying for the 5-tier cake. And we will certainly not be paying for the ballroom itself. Another beat of silence. Then Mrs. Davies' voice came back, and this time all the professional politeness was gone. It was replaced by something else. Something understanding. Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice low. I think I understand. I was at the entrance. I witnessed the interaction between the beneficiaries and an older gentleman. That older gentleman, Alistair said, his voice hardening, was Mr. Elijah Vance, the sole trustee of the very fund paying for their party, the man they publicly humiliated and denied entry to, the dishonor I mentioned in Clause 12B. That was it. My God, Mrs. Davies whispered. I thought so. It was despicable. I've been a manager here for 15 years, Mr. Hayes, and I have never seen anything like it. The way both of them spoke to him. I closed my eyes. Hearing her say it, a stranger, it validated my pain. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. It was despicable. Then you understand the trust's position, Alistair said. Their approval for these funds was contingent on their moral conduct. They failed the test. The party Mrs. Davies is over. Yes, sir, she replied. The hesitation was gone. Now her voice was all business. What would you like me to do? The groom, Mr. Covington, has a bar tab open that is significant. The orchestra is contracted for another 3 hours. The food, the trust, Alistair cut in, is no longer involved. Your contract from this moment forward is with Mr. Bradley Covington. I suggest you secure payment immediately, from him, personally, before he and his investors consume any more of your inventory. I understand completely, Mr. Hayes. Thank you for the notification. One more thing, Mrs. Davies, Alistair added. Yes, sir. The man they threw out, Mr. Vance. He's sitting in my office right now. He's my oldest and dearest friend. Please, Mrs. Davies said, and her voice was genuine, please tell him that I am profoundly sorry for what he experienced at my hotel. I will, Alistair said. Good evening, Mrs. Davies. He hung up the phone. The silence in the office returned. I opened my eyes. I looked at Alistair. He just raised an eyebrow. Well, he said, standing up and walking to a polished wood cabinet in the corner. That's that. He pulled out 2 heavy crystal glasses and a bottle of whiskey. A very, very expensive bottle. The kind Rosie used to buy for him on his birthday. I don't feel good about this, Alistair, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She's She's still my daughter. Alistair stopped pouring. He looked at me, his eyes softening for the first time. No, Eli, he said gently. She's not. Not tonight. Tonight she's just a beneficiary in breach of contract. Tonight she's Brad Covington's problem. He handed me a glass. Rosalind didn't just trust you to protect her money, old friend. She trusted you to protect her honor. That's what you just did. I took the glass. My hand was steady. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt necessary. I had done what I had to do. I had kept my promise. I took a sip of the whiskey. It burned all the way down. And in my mind, I could hear the faint sound of music far across the harbor suddenly stopping. My name is Elijah Vance, 75 years old, and I sat in silence. Alistair Hayes, my oldest friend, my lawyer, had just hung up the phone. He had done what I asked. He had executed the clause Rosalind, my late wife, had written into her will. He had protected her honor. He poured another 2 fingers of dark whiskey into my glass. I hadn't touched the first one. Well, Alistair said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet 30th floor office. That's that. The manager, Mrs. Davies, is not a woman who hesitates. I stared at the phone on his desk. My heart was a heavy stone in my chest. I thought about Chloe, my daughter. I had just detonated her life. They won't know it was us, will they? I whispered. They'll just think it's a bank error, right? A mistake. Alistair looked at me, his eyes full of a wisdom that I suddenly felt very tired of. No, Eli, they will know exactly who did this, and they will know why. Mrs. Davies is not a subtle woman. She was offended by what she saw. As if summoned, the phone on his desk rang, a sharp digital sound that made me jump. Alistair looked at the caller ID. He raised an eyebrow. Speak of the devil, it's Mrs. Davies. He looked at me, then pressed the speakerphone button. Alistair Hayes speaking. Mrs. Davies's voice filled the room. It was no longer calm or professional. It was tense. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Vance, are you still there? I'm here. Mrs. Davies, I said, my voice hoarse. Good, she said. I am standing just outside the ballroom. They are about to give the champagne toast. I thought you should hear this, as witnesses. I'm putting my phone in my pocket. Just listen. Alistair looked at me and nodded. We were no longer just giving the order. We were now at the execution. We heard the sound of the ballroom swell as she must have re-entered. We could hear the string quartet playing a beautiful light piece by Vivaldi. We heard the murmur and laughter of 130 guests. We heard the clinking of glasses. It sounded happy. It sounded like a wedding. And then a new sound. Brad's voice amplified by a microphone, booming, full of false confidence. And I want to thank all of you, he said, and I could hear the fake emotion in his voice. My most valued partners, my new investors, for being here to celebrate with me and with my stunning bride, Chloe. We heard the sound of applause. Loud, enthusiastic applause. I closed my eyes. And now, Brad continued, if the staff could please refill everyone's glass. The good stuff this time. We are here to celebrate. And then, silence. The music didn't fade out. It scratched to a halt as if the needle had been ripped off a record. The sudden quiet was shocking. We heard a few people cough. We heard a glass clink nervously. We heard a woman's voice, a guest whisper, "What's going on?" Then we heard her voice. Mrs. Davies. She was on the microphone now. Her voice was not a whisper. It was a clear, cold, professional bell that cut through the silence. "Excuse me, Mr. Covington. I apologize for the interruption." We heard Brad. His voice was no longer booming. It was tight, annoyed. "What is this, Mrs. Davies? We're in the middle of a toast." "My apologies, sir," she said, and I could picture her standing there, a statue of cold authority. "But this cannot wait." "Ladies and gentlemen, please, just one moment." She was speaking to the whole room. She was speaking to all of his investors. "Mr. Covington," she continued, "we have just received an official and immediate legal notification from Hayes Hamilton and Associates." acting on behalf of the Rosalind Vance Trust. I held my breath. Alistair just watched the phone, his face like stone. "We have been informed," Mrs. Davies's voice rang out, "that the trust has officially revoked all payments for this event, citing a severe breach of contract by the beneficiaries." A sound, a collective sharp gasp from 130 people. I heard Chloe's voice, faint, panicked. Brad, what is she talking about?" "The $100,000 payment which was funding this entire celebration," Mrs. Davies announced, "has been frozen and is being recalled." I heard Brad laugh, a high, tight, terrible sound. "What? That's ridiculous. This is some kind of clerical error. Some mistake my father-in-law wouldn't—" "There is no mistake, Mr. Covington," Mrs. Davies said, her voice like ice. "I have just spoken with Mr. Alistair Hayes himself. The revocation is final." I looked at Alistair. He just took a slow, deliberate sip of his whiskey. "As of this moment," Mrs. Davies's voice boomed, "all hotel services are suspended." We heard it. The string quartet immediately started packing up. We heard the clatter of a violin case closing. We heard the scrape of chairs as the musicians stood up. We heard a guest's voice, a man clear in the silence. "Did she say suspended? What the hell is going on?" "The bar is closed," Mrs. Davies declared. "The kitchens are closed. The staff is being dismissed." "You can't do this," Brad yelled. He was no longer laughing. "I can, sir. And I am," Mrs. Davies said. "Furthermore, we will require an immediate in-person payment of $50,000 to cover the costs already incurred for the ballroom, the staff, and the food and beverage already consumed." "50,000? I heard Chloe shriek. "Brad, I don't have—" "That's absurd," Brad stammered. "We require payment now, Mr. Covington," Mrs. Davies said, her voice final. "Or I will be forced to have my security team escort all 130 of your guests, your investors, out of the building. Immediately." There was a moment of chaos, shouting, people standing up, and then a click. Mrs. Davies had hung up. Alistair Hayes leaned forward. He pressed the button to end the call. The silence in his office was heavier than before. He picked up the whiskey bottle and refilled my glass, which I still hadn't touched. "Well," Alistair said, raising his own glass in a mock toast. "The toast is over." I just nodded. I picked up my glass, and for the first time in 10 years I drank. I drank deep. I felt the burn, but it was nothing compared to the ice in my chest. I felt a single sharp stab of, not victory, not anger, just a deep hollow and terrible sadness. My name is Elijah Vance, 75 years old. I sat frozen in that leather chair 30 stories above the city. Alistair's hand was still on the speakerphone. We weren't talking. We were just listening. The audio coming from Mrs. Davies' pocket was muffled, chaotic. We heard her voice, distant now, no longer on the microphone. "Sir, I must insist. $50,000. Then Brad's voice, tight with rage. "You're making a scene. Do you know who these people are?" "I know who you are, Mr. Covington." Her voice was like ice. "And I know that my staff has not been paid. Payment. Now." We heard a collective murmur swell the sound of 130 wealthy, uncomfortable people. They weren't just guests anymore. They were witnesses to a shipwreck. This was the part of the show where the orchestra stops playing and everyone realizes the boat is actually sinking. These were his investors, the men he was trying to impress, the men he was trying to con, and they were watching him bleed. "Fine," Brad's voice again, sharp, arrogant. "You want your money, you'll get your money. You just embarrassed me for no reason." We heard a rustle, the sound of a wallet being pulled out. "Put it on this," he snapped. "American Express. Black card. Run it." I looked at Alistair. He just shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. He knew things about Brad that I didn't even know yet. We waited. The silence over the phone was agonizing. We heard the faint beep-boop-beep of the handheld machine. Then, a longer failing beep. Mrs. Davies's voice returned, cold, clear. "Sir, this card has been declined." "What?" Brad's voice was a squeak. "That's impossible." Run it again. You typed it wrong. I did not, sir, she said. I could almost hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. It is declined. Insufficient funds. Insufficient funds. I thought about the $100,000 I had signed over. The money that was supposed to be the foundation of this whole charade. That was the money Brad was counting on. That was the money he was using to leverage his lies. I had pulled the first brick, and now the whole wall was coming down. Here, Brad's voice was frantic now. Use this one. It's a Visa, a corporate card. We heard the beeps again. We heard the same sad, declining tone. Declined, sir. Try this one, this one. He was yelling now, his voice cracking. MasterCard, it's platinum. I could hear Chloe in the background. Brad, what's happening? Why isn't it working? Her voice was high, terrified. Shut up, Chloe, he snapped. The beeps again. The same result. Sir, Mrs. Davies said, her patience clearly gone. All 3 of your cards have been declined. It appears you cannot cover the $50,000 charge. The murmuring from the guests was louder now. I heard a man's voice, one of the investors, say clear as day. 3 declined cards. I thought he said the deal in Singapore closed. I heard another woman laugh. A short, cruel bark. My God, it's a disaster. He's a fraud. I heard Brad stammering. It's a bank error, a security freeze. Because of the travel. He wasn't fooling anyone. He wasn't fooling the investors. He wasn't fooling Mrs. Davies. Security. Mrs. Davies's voice was a cannon shot. We heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. The bar is closed. The kitchens are closed. The orchestra will stop playing. And then the sound I had been waiting for, the sound that confirmed the end. The house lights. I heard a loud clack through the phone, the sound of heavy-duty breakers. The ambient sound of the room changed. The warm, intimate golden glow of the party was gone, replaced by the harsh, unforgiving glare of the overhead fluorescent lights, the service lights, the cleaning lights. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Davies's voice boomed again, this time back on the main microphone. Her voice echoed through the ballroom and through Alistair's office. Due to an unresolved payment failure. This celebration is now concluded. I must ask you all, for security and liability reasons, to please gather your belongings and exit the ballroom immediately. We apologize for the inconvenience. The sound that followed was chaos. It wasn't polite murmuring. It was the scrape of 130 chairs on marble. It was angry, confused shouting. What kind of operation is this, Covington? This is a fraud. I want my wedding gift back. And then beneath the noise we heard it. A high-pitched, agonizing wail. A sound of total, complete despair. It was Chloe. She wasn't yelling anymore. She was just screaming. Alistair Hayes leaned forward and very deliberately, very gently pressed the button ending the call. The silence of his office rushed back in. I looked at my empty whiskey glass. My God, Alistair, I whispered. What have we done? Alistair looked at me. His face was not triumphant. It was grim. We haven't done anything, Eli. We just stopped paying for the lies. The truth did the rest. I thought of Chloe crumpled on that cold marble floor in her $100,000 dress. I thought of Brad standing there exposed as a fraud in front of the very people he was trying to con. I, Elijah Vance, a retired postman, had just taken down the whole house of cards, and I hadn't even had to raise my voice. The sun was just starting to hit the front windows of my house in West Baltimore. It was Sunday morning. Quiet. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, the one Rosie and I bought at a yard sale in 1978. I was drinking black coffee hot from my favorite mug, the one that said "World's Greatest Dad." Chloe had given it to me when she was 10. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. Yesterday I was a father. Today, I'm just a man with a promise to keep. I hadn't slept. I just sat there watching the night turn to gray and now to a watery yellow. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I thought about the chaos I had caused, the ballroom, the music stopping, the lights flashing on. I thought about Chloe's face pale with shock. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt empty. I looked at the photo of Rosalind on the wall. I did it, Rosie, I whispered. I did what you asked. I protected your legacy. And then I heard it. It wasn't a knock. It was a pounding, a frantic, furious, desperate banging on my front door. It wasn't the sound of a neighbor needing sugar. It was the sound of rage. The old wood of the door rattled in its frame. I sighed. I knew they would come. I just didn't think they'd come this fast. I calmly put my coffee mug down. I stood up, smoothing the front of my old wool cardigan. I walked slowly down the short hallway. The banging continued louder this time. "Open this door, old man, I know you're in there." That was Brad's voice. The smooth, charming consultant was gone. This was the voice of the animal underneath. I took a deep breath. I turned the deadbolt and opened the door. They were a disaster. It was 9 in the morning, and they were still wearing their wedding clothes. Chloe, my daughter. Her $100,000 dress was ripped at the hem, wrinkled and stained with what looked like red wine down the front. Her perfect hair was falling out in strands, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. Brad was worse. His tuxedo was unbuttoned, his shirt ripped open at the collar. He hadn't shaved. His face was blotchy and red, his eyes bloodshot with rage, and I realized a lot of alcohol. They looked like ghosts from a party that had died a violent death. Chloe pushed past me, stumbling into the hallway. "You!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You did this. You ruined everything." I just stood there. She smelled like stale champagne and desperation. This was my daughter, the little girl I taught to ride a bike. "I did nothing, Chloe," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "I just stopped paying for the party." "The party?" she shrieked. "You call that a party? That was my wedding. That was my life. You humiliated me. You humiliated me in front of everyone, my friends, Brad's partners. My whole life is over." She grabbed my arm. "How could you? All because of your petty, stupid pride. All because you weren't invited." I looked at her. Petty pride. That's what she called it. Not dignity, not respect. "No, Chloe," I said, pulling my arm free. "Not because I wasn't invited, because you told me to go away. Because you were ashamed of me. You." She stammered, but she had no answer. That's when Brad stepped in. He shoved the front door shut with his foot. The slam echoed through my little house. The mask was gone. This was the real Brad Covington. "You think you're clever, don't you, old man?" he sneered. He took a step toward me, jabbing his finger in my face. "You think you're some kind of king sitting on her money?" "It's not my money, Brad," I said, holding my ground. "It was never my money. It was my wife's." "It's Chloe's money," he roared, his face turning a dark, ugly red. "She's the beneficiary. You're just the gatekeeper. A glorified mailman with a set of keys you don't even deserve to hold. You had no right to do that. That money was ours. You owe us. You owe her ours." There it was, the truth, raw and ugly. It wasn't his love for Chloe. It was his love for Rosalind's trust. "You're wrong, son," I said, and the word son tasted like ash in my mouth. "That's where you're wrong." I looked past him at my daughter, who was just standing there crying those angry, selfish tears. "That money was not yours, Chloe. It was your mother's, and she gave it to me." I took a step forward. For the first time, Brad took a step back. "She gave it to me," I said, my voice low and cold, "to protect her legacy. And most of all, she gave it to me to protect her daughter. From greedy, parasitic, bottom-feeding men. Exactly. Like you." Brad's face went from red to white. He looked like I had slapped him. "Why you?" He lunged, but Chloe surprisingly stopped him. "Brad, no, don't." He shook her off. He was breathing hard, staring at me. He saw the look in my eyes. He saw I wasn't scared of him. I'd been a mailman in West Baltimore for 40 years. I've seen things that would make him run screaming. He was nothing. He saw he couldn't bully me, so he changed tactics. He smiled, a slow, ugly smile. "You've made a mistake, old man," he whispered. "A big one. This isn't over. Oh no, this is just getting started." He pulled Chloe toward the door. "We're getting a lawyer, today." He turned back to face me, his eyes gleaming with a new vicious idea. "We're going to take you to court. We'll tell everyone, we'll prove you're senile, that you're an incompetent, vindictive, confused old fool who isn't fit to manage his own bank account, let alone a multi-million-dollar trust." Chloe's head snapped up. I saw the spark in her eyes. She liked this idea. "When we're done with you," Brad sneered, "you won't have a dime. You'll be in a state-run home. You'll lose everything. He yanked the door open. Come on, Chloe, we're leaving. He grabbed her by the arm and pulled her out onto the porch. He gave me one last look of pure hatred. Then he slammed the door. So hard this time, the little silver frame on the wall, the one with Rosalind's picture, it rattled, fell, and the glass shattered. I just stood there in the silence. My house felt violated. Incompetent. That was the word. They were going to fight dirty. I calmly walked to the picture, picked it up, and gently brushed the broken glass away from Rosie's smiling face. They're worse than you thought, Rosie, I whispered. But so am I. I walked to the kitchen, my steps steady. I picked up my cold coffee mug. I walked to the phone, and I dialed Alistair Hayes. Alistair, it's Eli. They were just here. They're going to sue. They're going to try and have me declared incompetent. Yes, I heard you. I looked at the shattered glass on the floor. Well then, we'd better find out just how competent Mr. Bradley Covington really is. I hung up the phone. The slam of my front door still echoed in the small hallway. My name is Elijah Vance. I'm 75 years old, and my house, the home I had shared with my wife Rosalind for 45 years, suddenly felt violated. I walked back into the living room. The shattered glass of Rosie's photograph was scattered across the floor, glinting in the Sunday morning light. They hadn't just insulted me. They hadn't just threatened me. They had broken my home. Incompetent. That was the word they were going to use as a key to steal my wife's legacy. A word that cut deeper than mailman. A mailman is proud. A mailman works. Incompetent. That's a word they use to erase you, to turn you into a ghost while you're still breathing. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the broken glass. My heart was pounding, but not with fear. It was a slow, heavy, angry beat. They thought I was a weak old man. They thought that because I was quiet, I was stupid. They thought that because I lived simply, I was simple. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I did what I'd done for 40 years when faced with a problem. I got methodical. I found the dustpan and brush. I carefully swept up every last sliver of glass, my hands steady. I placed the picture of Rosie scratched but whole on the kitchen table. Then I picked up the phone. I dialed Alistair Hayes. He picked up on the second ring. Eli, that was fast. What did they do? They were just here, Alistair, I said. I kept my voice low, calm. They showed up at my house, still in their wedding clothes, smelling like a distillery. I heard Alistair let out a long, slow sigh. And they're angry. Brad, he's not the smooth talker you and I know. He's ugly. He's a brawler. And Chloe? Alistair asked. I paused. This part hurt. She's right there with him. She called it petty pride, said I ruined her life. That girl, Alistair started, but I cut him off. That's not why I'm calling. They're making a move, just like you said. They're going to sue. They're going to try and have me declared incompetent. I expected Alistair to curse. I expected him to be angry. Instead, I heard him laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a short, sharp, dangerous bark, like a guard dog that just heard a twig snap. Incompetent, he said. Oh, Eli, that's not a threat. That's a gift. I frowned. I was in no mood for his lawyer games. A gift, Alistair, they're talking about putting me in a home. They're trying to take the trust. No, Eli, listen to me. Alistair said, his voice dropping, becoming the voice that commanded courtrooms. That boy Brad, he just showed us his hand. He's desperate. Think about it. Men with real power. Men with patience. They don't scream in their 75-year-old father-in-law's living room on a Sunday morning. They don't make clumsy threats. They act. This is sloppy. This is panic. It means he's running out of time. I thought about that. The desperation I saw in Brad's bloodshot eyes. The way Chloe was clinging to him, not in love, but in mutual panic. Running out of time for what? I asked. The wedding was yesterday. The money? This was never about a wedding, Eli. Alistair's voice was sharp. The 100,000. That was just the first withdrawal. He was testing the defenses. He was testing you. He needed that money, Eli. He needed it badly. And when you shut him down, he panicked. He's drowning, and he's trying to pull the whole trust down with him. The incompetence lawsuit is his Hail Mary pass. A dark, cold understanding began to settle over me. So what do we do? So, Alistair said, we have two choices. We can wait for his lawsuit. We can play defense. We can spend the next 6 months in and out of court, paying doctors to prove what we already know, that you're sharper than half the men in this city. Or, I heard the shift in his voice, the hunt. Or we can find out why he's drowning. I gripped the phone. What do you mean? A man that polished that slick with that much fake confidence, he's hiding something. He's got skeletons, Eli. My guess, he's got debts. And I know just the man to dig them up. We stop defending Eli. We start attacking. This was new territory. I was a mailman. I delivered. I didn't attack. Who? Marcus Cole, Alistair said. You won't find him in the phone book. He's ex-Secret Service. He handled financial crimes. The man can find a receipt in a wildfire. He's quiet, he's thorough, and he is not cheap. But he's the best. I thought about the money. This was getting big. Alistair, it's your call, Eli. Do we wait for the wolf to knock again, or do we find out where his den is? I looked at the picture of Rosie on my table, her smile shattered by broken glass. I thought of her words, protect her from herself, protect my legacy. I thought of Brad's sneering face, a glorified mailman. Eli, Alistair asked, his voice soft. I want to know, I said, and my own voice surprised me. It was cold. It was hard. I want to know why he's so desperate. I want to know everything. It'll cost you, Eli, out of pocket. We can't use the trust for this. Not yet. I've got my pension, I said. I've got 40 years of savings. I never lived large, Alistair. You know that. This is what I was saving for. Hire Mr. Cole. Use my personal accounts. This one's on me. There was a pause on the line. Then Alistair's voice came back, full of something I hadn't heard in a long time. Pride. Consider it done, old friend. Go get some rest. The real fight just started. I hung up the phone. I wasn't just a mailman anymore. The hunt was on. I had no idea that what Marcus Cole was about to find wasn't just a skeleton, it was a whole graveyard. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. For 2 days I did nothing. I just sat in my house in West Baltimore. I'd cleaned up the broken glass from Rosie's picture. I'd set the frame, now empty, back on the table. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. But it was never Chloe. It was never Brad. It was just telemarketers. It was as if, after that terrible Sunday morning confrontation, they had vanished. My mind kept replaying their threat. Incompetent, a confused old fool. They were coming for me. They were coming for Rosie's trust. And I was just waiting. I was a mailman. I knew how to deliver. I didn't know how to fight. On Tuesday morning, my phone rang. I looked. It was Alistair. Eli, he said. His voice was different. No pleasantries. He's here. Can you come to the office now? Who? I asked, but I already knew. Mr. Cole, Alistair said. He found something. I was out the door in 5 minutes. The taxi ride back to Charles Street felt different. The anger I'd felt on Sunday had cooled. Now it was just a cold, heavy dread. What if they were right? What if I was just an old fool? What if I had made a terrible mistake pulling that money? I walked into Alistair's office. The secretary, a young woman who always smiled, just nodded at me grimly and pointed me right in. Alistair was standing by his window, not sitting behind his desk. He wasn't alone. The third man was unassuming. He looked to be in his late 50s. Dark skin, quiet eyes, wearing a simple button-down shirt. No tie. He looked more like a history professor than a private detective. He didn't look like an ex-Secret Service agent at all, which is probably what made him so good at it. Eli, Alistair said, turning from the window. This is Marcus Cole. Mr. Cole, this is my friend Elijah Vance. Cole stood up. His handshake was firm, dry, and brief. Mr. Vance. He gestured for me to sit. I sat in that same leather chair I'd sat in 2 days ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed. You found something? Marcus Cole didn't waste time. He opened a slim folder on the coffee table. "You hired me to find out why your son-in-law Bradley Covington was desperate for money." "That's right," I said. "Well," Cole said, "the short answer is he's not a financial consultant. He's a ghost." Alistair crossed his arms. "Explain." "The company," Cole said, his voice flat, "Covington Capital Partners. It doesn't exist. Not legally. The address he lists is a mail drop service in Wilmington, Delaware. The phone number forwards to his personal cell." My hands gripped the arms of the chair. What do you mean it doesn't exist? He has clients. He has business cards." "He has victims, Mr. Vance," Cole corrected me. "What Mr. Covington is running is a classic Ponzi scheme. Ponzi. I just knew the word from the news. Bernie Madoff. It meant stealing. It meant lies stacked on top of lies on top of lies. For the past 3 years," Cole continued, pulling out a sheet of paper with a list of names, "he's been taking money from investors. He promises them 30% returns on overseas real estate. He uses money from new investors to pay dividends to the old ones, but it's all collapsing. The checks to his first wave investors, they started bouncing 3 weeks ago." "My God," Alistair breathed, sitting down heavily. "How much?" I asked. My voice was a whisper. Cole looked at his notes. "His total debt to his current investors is approximately $1.2 million. $1.2 million. I thought about my pension. I thought about my 40 years of walking a route. I thought about the $100,000 I had signed over. It was just a drop in a bucket of debt. I suddenly saw the wedding in a new sickening light, the desperation, the fury. "That's what the wedding was for," I said. It wasn't a question. Cole nodded. He was impressed. "Exactly, Mr. Vance. The wedding wasn't a wedding. It was a show, a stage production." He pulled out another piece of paper. It was a guest list. "These people," he said, tapping the list, "these prominent families he was so worried about, they weren't his friends. They were his targets, his next round of victims." Alistair caught on. He was trying to look legitimate, look stable, a big, fancy wedding, a beautiful bride from a good Baltimore family. "A bride with a multi-million-dollar trust fund," Cole finished for him. "He was using your daughter, Mr. Vance, and your wife's legacy as bait. He was putting on a show of wealth and stability to lure in one last big score, enough to pay off the angriest investors and skip the country. The doorman, the roses, the string quartet, the champagne. It was all a lie, a set. I thought of Brad's face when I showed up. The panic, the fury. It wasn't because I was embarrassing him. It was because my old gray suit, my reality, was threatening to tear down his entire fake world. I was the one thing he couldn't control. I was the truth walking into his theater of lies. He needed that 100,000 from me." I said, the pieces clicking into place with a horrible metallic sound. "He didn't just want it for a party. He needed it. He needed it to keep the lights on for this one last con." "It's worse than that," Cole said. "He needed it to keep from going to jail. Or worse, some of these investors are not the kind of people who sue." The room was silent. Alistair just stared at the folder. A new, more terrible thought, a colder, darker dread was creeping into my heart. It pushed aside the humiliation. It pushed aside the anger. It left only a sickening, icy fear. "My God," I whispered, looking at Alistair. He was using her. He was using Chloe, my little girl." I looked at my oldest friend, my face pleading. I needed him to tell me I was right. "Alistair, Chloe, she doesn't know, right? She couldn't, she wouldn't be a part of something like this. She's just been fooled. She's a victim too." "Right." Alistair held my gaze. He didn't answer. He just looked at me with those old, sad eyes. And then he looked at Marcus Cole. And in that shared, heavy silence, I found my answer. "My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old." The room was silent. Alistair just stared at me. Marcus Cole, the investigator, was packing his slim folder. $1.2 million. A Ponzi scheme. A pack of lies. My daughter, my Chloe, she was a victim. All her anger, her shame at the wedding, it wasn't because she was ashamed of me. It was because she was terrified. She was trapped by this man, this con artist. The anger I'd felt toward her vanished. It was replaced by a wave of something much stronger. Fear. I had to protect her. I had failed Rosie's promise. I had let the wolf in the door. "Alistair," I said, my voice shaking. We have to help her. We have to get her away from him. If he's that desperate, if he's cornered, my God, what could he do to her?" Alistair looked at me, his face grim. "Eli, she's a grown woman. She made her choice." "She didn't choose this," I snapped. "She didn't choose a criminal. She just fell in love with a liar." Marcus Cole, who had been quietly putting his papers away, stopped. He looked at Alistair. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice quiet flat. "Sit down." I was already sitting, but his tone made me feel like I was falling. "What is it?" I asked. "What haven't you told me?" Alistair closed his eyes. "Tell him, Marcus." Cole sat down in the chair opposite me. He didn't open his folder. He just looked at me. "Mr. Vance," he said, "I told you that Mr. Covington was a ghost, that his company was a shell. I kept digging. I wanted to know who he really was before he was Brad Covington, financial consultant." He slid a single piece of paper across the polished mahogany desk. "It's worse than we thought, Mr. Vance." I stared at the paper. It was a photocopy, a legal document. I didn't need my reading glasses to see the header. Commonwealth of Virginia, Certificate of Marriage. I looked at the names. Groom Bradley T. Covington. Bride Karen S. Lindell. I didn't understand. He was married before. He's a divorced man. That's nothing everyone's... "No, Mr. Vance." Cole interrupted, his voice soft but stopping me cold. "Look at the date." I leaned in. My blood turned to ice. My heart stopped. The date was 5 years ago. "Now look at this one," Cole said, sliding a second paper next to it. "State of Maryland, Certificate of Marriage. Groom Bradley T. Covington. Bride Chloe R. Vance." The date was from yesterday, Saturday, the wedding that never finished. I looked back and forth between the two papers. Virginia, Maryland, Karen, Chloe. He never divorced her," I whispered. "No, sir," Marcus Cole said. "He did not. As of this morning, Bradley Covington is legally married to 2 different women. He's a bigamist." The word hung in the air. Bigamist. It wasn't just a financial crime anymore. It wasn't just debt. This was filth. This was a man who didn't just break promises. He broke lives. He broke laws. I felt sick. A wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the arms of the leather chair to keep from falling out of it. My daughter. My Chloe Bug. She hadn't just married a liar. She hadn't just married a thief. She had participated in a crime without even knowing it. She was married to a man who was already married. Her marriage. The one I paid for, the one she threw me out of. It wasn't even real. "Oh my God," I breathed. "My girl, my little girl. What has he done to her?" The protective instinct, the one I'd felt since the day I first held her in my arms. It roared to life. I wasn't just a mailman. I was a father. And this man had put his hands on my child. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but my hands were clenched into fists. "We're going," I said, my voice a low growl I didn't recognize. "Going where Eli?" Alistair asked, watching me. "We're going to get my daughter. We're going to that rat trap apartment they're in, and I'm pulling her out. I'm telling her everything. I'm showing her this." I pointed at the marriage certificate. "We have to save her, before he finds out we know, before he hurts her." I was already at the door. I had to get to her. I had to fix this. "Eli, wait!" Alistair's voice wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. It stopped me dead. I turned around, my heart pounding with pure hot adrenaline. "What, Alistair? What are you waiting for?" "We have to go." Alistair stood up slowly. He looked at me with those old, sad lawyer's eyes, the eyes that saw the things I didn't want to see. "Sit down, old friend," he said softly. "I won't sit down. I'm going to get my daughter." "Eli, sit down," he said again. "You're thinking like a father. You need to think like a trustee. You need to think like Rosie." "What are you talking about? Rosie would..." She would want me to save her. Yes, Alistair said. She would. But first we have to be sure of one thing. He picked up the 2 marriage certificates. He held them up. We have to be sure, he said, and his voice was heavy, full of a dread that I hadn't even let myself consider. We still don't know, Eli. Don't know what... Alistair looked me right in the eye, and he asked the question that shattered everything, all over again. We still don't know what she knows. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Alistair's question hung in the air of that expensive office, sharp and heavy as an axe. We still don't know what she knows. I just stared at him. My mind, which had been racing with scenarios, rescuing Chloe, confronting Brad, protecting her, it just stopped. What are you talking about, Alistair? My voice was thin. She's my daughter. She's a victim. Just like those other investors. Alistair didn't say anything. He just held my gaze, his eyes full of a deep, old sadness. He didn't have to argue. He just looked over at Marcus Cole, the investigator. Cole, who had been silent, picked his slim folder back up from the coffee table. He didn't meet my eyes. He looked at the folder as if it were the one delivering the bad news, not him. Mr. Vance, Cole began, his voice flat, professional, no emotion in it at all. When you asked if your daughter knew about the Ponzi scheme, or the bigamy, I couldn't answer. I didn't have the proof. He paused, and then he added, I do now. He didn't pull out a document this time. He pulled out a slim black laptop. He opened it, turned it toward me and Alistair. We recovered data from a cloud server Brad Covington thought he had erased. It contains his complete email and text message archives, going back 3 years. I didn't understand. What does that mean? What are you showing me? Alistair leaned forward, his face grim. It means Eli were about to see what they were saying when they thought no one was listening. Cole clicked a file. An email chain appeared on the screen. The date. My God, the date. It was from 2.5 years ago. This wasn't recent. This wasn't a mistake made in panic. This was the beginning. The sender, Cole said, his voice a monotone, is Chloe R. Vance. The recipient is Bradley T. Covington. This was 6 months before you ever met him. I leaned in. My eyes are old. My heart is older. I tried to read the tiny words. Read it, I whispered. Alistair took a deep breath. His own voice was shaking, not with sadness, but with a cold building rage I had never heard from him before. He pointed to the screen. Subject, the old man. I felt a jolt as if I'd been shocked. The old man. Eli? Alistair started looking at me, giving me a chance to back out. Read it, I said. Alistair cleared his throat and read. Email from Chloe Brad. I'm at dinner with him now. He's just so simple. My mother Rosalind left a huge trust fund, but my father, this conservative old mailman, he controls everything. I stopped breathing. Alistair continued reading, his voice getting harder with every word. He's very gullible. He still thinks I'm his little girl. He keeps telling me stories about his mail route. It's pathetic, but he trusts me completely. He's the lock on the box, Brad, and you're the key. Gullible, pathetic, the old man. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. No, that wasn't my Chloe bug. She must have been. Maybe he was pressuring her, I stammered. There's a reply, Eli, Alistair said, his voice flat. He pointed to the screen. From Brad, dated the same night. Cole scrolled down. Alistair read the reply. Email from Brad. Don't you worry that pretty head, baby. Leave the old man to me. I'll make him believe I love you. I'll make him believe I'm the son he never had. We just need to get him to approve the first big withdrawal. This wedding idea, it's perfect. I closed my eyes. The son he never had. I remembered him saying that. I remembered him at Thanksgiving dinner telling me how much he admired me. All lies. All of it. There's more, Alistair said. The last part. He read the final line of Brad's email. If he approves 100,000 for the wedding, we can use that as leverage. We'll use it to sue him for the rest. We'll claim he's unfit. We'll take everything. I just stared. I stared at the screen. I read the words. Leave the old man to me. Sue him for the rest. Unfit. This wasn't a man seducing my daughter. This wasn't a con artist fooling a naive girl. This was a conspiracy. A partnership. She hadn't been fooled. I was the fool. The last 2 years. Everything. It was all a lie. Every Sunday dinner, every I love you, Dad, every worried phone call, every time she'd ask me for a little help, just a loan to tide her over, every time Brad had clapped me on the back calling me Dad Eli, it was all a performance, a long, slow, meticulous 2-year con. They weren't just trying to take the money, they were hunting me for it. I felt Alistair's heavy hand land on my shoulder. I hadn't even realized I was shaking. I wasn't just shaking, I was crumbling. I was a 75-year-old man and my life was disintegrating right there on a laptop screen. Eli, Alistair said, his voice quiet, pained. Old friend. I tried to speak. No sound came out. I looked at Alistair, my eyes pleading. Pleading for what? For it to be a lie. She... I finally managed to whisper. She knew about the other wife, about Karen. Cole just nodded. The emails confirm it, Mr. Vance. It was part of their plan. They called her their insurance policy in case he got caught. It was all planned. My daughter, my baby girl. She hadn't been trapped by a wolf, Eli. I looked at Alistair, the terrible truth finally settling on me like a shroud. Alistair squeezed my shoulder hard. No, Eli, he said, his voice heavy with the terrible truth. She wasn't trapped. She was the bait. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. I don't remember the taxi ride home from Alistair's office. I don't remember putting the key in the lock. I was suddenly standing in my hallway. The house was dark, silent. It was the same house I'd shared with Rosalind for 45 years. The same walls that had heard all of Chloe's firsts. Her first laugh, her first steps, her first heartbroken sobs over some high school boy. Gullible, pathetic, the old man. The words from those emails echoed in the silence. The words she wrote. I walked past the kitchen. I walked past the living room. My feet moving on their own took me to the doorway of her old room, Chloe's room. I never had the heart to change it. Not really. The walls were still that pale pink she'd begged for when she was 12. The white dresser was still there, the one I'd painted myself. The little desk where she did her homework. I could almost smell the strawberry shampoo she used to use. I could almost see her pigtails and skinned knees. I looked at the empty corner by the window. That's where her first two-wheeler used to lean. A red Schwinn. I remember the day I took the training wheels off out back in the alley. It was 1992. She was so scared. Don't let go, Daddy, she'd squealed. Don't let go. I ran behind her, my back aching, my hand steady on the seat. I won't, Chloe Bug. I got you. I'll never let you fall. And then I let go. And she was flying. She was flying, and her laughter. I swear in that moment her laughter was the only music that mattered in the whole world. My eyes drifted to the closet door. I opened it. The hinges creaked. Way in the back, tucked behind an old blanket, was a plastic dress bag. I zipped it open. The prom dress. Pale blue covered in tiny shimmering sequins. It cost $400. $400 in 1998. To a man on a postman's salary. That was a universe. I remembered that month. I took every extra shift they offered at the post office. It felt like the Christmas rush, but it was April. My feet were swollen slabs of meat at the end of the day. My back felt like it was splitting in two. I ate bean and bread sandwiches for dinner every night for 3 solid weeks. But when she came down those stairs on prom night, when I saw the look on her face, she looked just like her mother. She looked like a queen. And it was all worth it. Every aching step. I sat down on her old bed. The mattress springs groaned under my weight. I could hear Rosie's voice clear as day. We were in the kitchen. Chloe was maybe 16. She'd just stormed off, slamming that bedroom door because we told her no. No, we could not buy her a brand new car for her 16th birthday. Rosalind was stirring a pot of stew on the stove. She was quiet for a long time, just the scrape of the wooden spoon against the pot. Then she turned to me. Her face was tired. "Eli," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you're going to break your back for that girl, and she's not going to love you for it." "That's not true, Rosie," I'd argued. "She's a good kid. She's just spirited." Rosalind shook her head. "She's a loved kid, Eli. That's different. You're giving her everything she wants. You're not teaching her what things cost. You're not teaching her to respect the work." She pointed the spoon at me. "One day she's going to look at your hard work, at your sweat, and she's just going to see less. Don't spoil her, Eli. Don't let your love make her weak. Don't let it make her cruel." I didn't listen. How could I? I loved her too much. I couldn't stand to see her unhappy. I thought my love would be enough to keep her safe. I thought it would be enough to teach her. I sat there in that cold pink room, a 75-year-old fool. Rosalind was right. She was right all along. My love didn't make Chloe strong. It made her weak. It made her entitled. It made her see me exactly as Rosie predicted. A gullible old man. Pathetic. Just a retired mailman. She wasn't just ashamed of my old suit at the wedding. She was ashamed of the work that paid for her entire life. She was ashamed of the sweat that paid for that $400 prom dress. She was ashamed of the man who ran down that alley holding her bicycle, promising he'd never ever let her fall. The pain. It was physical. I felt my chest tighten as if a steel band was cranking around my ribs. I clutched the old bedspread. This wasn't just Brad. This wasn't just a con artist. He wasn't the wolf. He was just the animal she'd invited in, the one she'd unlatched the door for, the one she'd hired to do the dirty work. She was the bait. I thought about the $1.2 million Ponzi scheme, the bigamy, the plan to sue me, to call me incompetent. Me, Elijah Vance. The man who raised a child alone for 10 years after his wife died. The man who managed his own money, who walked a 30-mile route every single day, rain or shine, heat or snow. Me, incompetent. I closed my eyes. The grief was a storm. It was so loud I thought it would tear me apart. I cried. I cried for the little girl with the pigtails. I cried for my Rosie, who saw it all coming and who I had failed. And then the storm passed. The tears stopped. I opened my eyes. The room was the same, the pale pink walls, the little white desk. But I was not the same. The pain was still there, but it had changed. It had frozen. It was no longer hot, messy grief. It was cold. It was hard. It was a piece of steel where my heart used to be. I stood up from the little pink bed. I walked out of her room, and for the first time in 20 years, I closed the door. Rosalind had made me promise to protect her legacy from Chloe. I had failed. I had been weak. I had been gullible. No more. This was no longer about saving my daughter. This was about stopping her. I walked to the kitchen. I picked up the phone. My hand was rock steady. I called Alistair. He picked up on the first ring. "Eli, are you?" "All right." "I'm fine, Alistair," I said. My voice was different. He heard it too. It was flat, empty. "They didn't just break the morality clause, did they?" I said. "They broke the law. Bigamy, conspiracy to commit fraud, a Ponzi scheme." "Yes, Eli," he said. "They did." "Then we're done playing defense," I said. "I want you to schedule a meeting. I want them in your office. I want that Karen Covington. I want her there. I want your investigator there. And I want the police." "Eli," Alistair said, his voice cautious, "are you sure this is your daughter?" I looked at the empty spot on the wall where Rosie's picture used to hang. "No," I said. "She's a criminal, and I'm the man my wife trusted to stop her. It's time to finish this. For Rosie." My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. When I walked into Alistair Hayes's office the next morning, I was a different man. The suit I wore was the same. The face was the same. But the man who had been shattered by his daughter's betrayal 24 hours ago, he was gone. He had died in that little pink bedroom surrounded by the ghosts of a life that was a lie. The man who walked into Alistair's office was Elijah Vance, trustee. Alistair knew it the second he saw me. He didn't offer me coffee. He didn't ask me if I was okay. He just pointed to the chair. "You slept," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I replied, sitting down in the black leather chair. "I didn't. But I woke up." I looked at him, my oldest friend, my only ally. "They didn't just disrespect me, Alistair. They didn't just try to humiliate me. I know, Eli," he said gently. "They're criminals." "Yes," I said. The word was cold and hard in my mouth. "They are. And they're not just criminals, they're clumsy. They're arrogant. They think I'm a fool. And that's what we're going to use." Alistair leaned forward, his hands clasped on his big mahogany desk. "What do you want to do, Eli? You tell me. We can sue them civilly. We can expose the bigamy. We can—" "No," I interrupted. "That's not enough. That's just messy. That's a fight. I don't want a fight. I want a conclusion, a clean end. I want to enforce Rosalind's will exactly as she wrote it." Alistair's eyes narrowed. He understood what I was asking. "The whole thing, Clause 12b. And what comes after?" "And what comes after," I confirmed. "They broke her trust. They broke the law, and they're going to lose it all." "All right," Alistair said, all business now. "So, what's the plan?" This was the part I had worked out sitting in the dark of my kitchen staring at the empty wall. "They want to sue me," I said. "They want to claim I'm incompetent, that I'm a confused old man. Fine. We'll give them a meeting. But we will control the meeting, not them." I leaned forward. "I want you to call them. You tell them that I'm distraught, that I'm reconsidering, that their threat of a lawsuit has scared me, and that I'm willing to negotiate." Alistair raised an eyebrow. "Negotiate, Eli? We're not giving them a damn dime." "I know," I said. "We're not negotiating about the money. We're just getting them in the room. You tell them I'm willing to discuss a new disbursement, a peace offering, a settlement to avoid a public court battle." "They'll bite," Alistair murmured, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "In their arrogance, they'll think they've won. They'll think the old man scared easy." "Exactly," I said. "So we set the meeting, here, in this room, tomorrow." "Who do you want present?" "I want everyone," I said. "I want Marcus Cole here with his laptop and every one of those emails. I want the marriage certificates, both of them, in a neat pile on that table. I want the financial records of the Ponzi scheme. And I want her. Her. The other one. The real one. The legal one." "Karen Covington!" Alistair whistled low and long. "Fly her in from Virginia. That's a power move, Eli." "She's a victim just like I am," I said. "I'm sure Mr. Cole can find her. I'm sure she'd be very interested to know what her husband has been doing with a multi-million-dollar trust fund and a mailman's daughter." "And then what?" Alistair asked. "We just confront them. Let them see it all at once." "We let them see it all at once," I said. "And when they realize they're trapped, when they're finally exposed, that's when you make one last call." "To who?" "To the Baltimore Police Department," I said. "I've already spoken to a Detective Miller, a good man. He's interested in Mr. Covington's Ponzi scheme. He said he'd be happy to listen to any new evidence we might have." Alistair was quiet for a long, long time. He just looked at me. "Eli," he said, his voice heavy, "are you absolutely 100% sure, you know what this means for Chloe?" I nodded. I knew. I had just tried to forget. Alistair stood and walked to the safe again. He pulled out Rosie's will. He didn't have to search for the page this time. He knew it by heart. Rosalind was a brilliant woman, Eli, but she was a hard woman. She did not believe in second chances when it came to betrayal. He looked at the page. Clause 14, the consequence clause. Should the beneficiary, Chloe R. Vance, be found by the trustee to have engaged in or conspired to engage in any criminal activity, or any act of profound moral turpitude, including conspiracy to defraud the trust or its trustee. He looked up at me. "If you do this, Eli, if you prove this, if you call the police and have her implicated in a fraud investigation," "I know," I said. Then she is to be disinherited, Alistair finished. Completely. Irrevocably. No appeals. 100% of the trust's assets, all $15 million, are to be immediately and fully redirected. My heart ached. $15 million. A life she could have had. A life she did have and was willing to gamble just to get it faster. Where did Rosie want it to go? I asked, though I already knew. It was never coming to me. Rosie knew better. She wanted it to go back where it came from, Alistair said. She wanted it to go home. He pointed to the last line of the clause. 100% of the trust's assets are to be transferred to the West Baltimore Community Center Foundation, to be used for youth education, senior care, and neighborhood revitalization. My neighborhood, the place I walked for 40 years, the place Rosie had loved. Alistair looked at me. If you call those cops Eli, you're not just taking away her wedding. You're not just exposing her husband. You are taking away everything. Her entire future, her inheritance, all of it. Is that really what you want? I looked out the window. I saw the city, my city. I saw the rooftops of West Baltimore in the distance. I saw the kids on the corners, the old folks sitting on their stoops. I thought of what that money could do, what it could build. I thought of what it had done to Chloe, how it had rotted her from the inside out. Rosalind wasn't just protecting her legacy from Chloe. She was protecting it for all of them. Chloe had made her choice. Now, I had to make mine. I turned back to my oldest friend. That's exactly what I want, Alistair, I said. They didn't just try to steal from me. They tried to steal from my community. They tried to steal Rosie's last wish. Make the calls. Hire the plane ticket. Let's set the stage. It's time to finish this. For Rosie. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. It was 9:30 in the morning on a cold Wednesday. I was back in Alistair Hayes' office. The hunt had been fast. It took Marcus Cole less than 48 hours to find them. They didn't go far, Alistair said, looking at a sheet of paper on his desk. They're holed up in a pay-by-the-week motel down near the stadium, the Royal Inn, a real palace. He said it with a sneer. Marcus Cole had done his job. He'd also found out that Brad's so-called investors were now calling him every 30 minutes, leaving messages that were no longer polite. They were threatening. They wanted their money, the $1.2 million. He's trapped, I said, looking out the window. A rat in a cage. And a trapped rat is the most dangerous kind, Alistair said. He looked at me, his eyes hard. You're sure you want to do this, Eli? We have enough to go to the police right now. The bigamy, the Ponzi scheme. We can end this. I thought about it. I thought about the police kicking in their door. I thought about Chloe being led away in handcuffs. A part of me, the father part, recoiled, but the other part, the part that remembered Rosie's final wish, knew it wasn't enough. No, I said. If we just send the police their victims, he's a con man. She's his foolish, duped wife. The world will pity her. She will pity herself. She will never, ever understand what she did. She will never understand the choice she made. I turned from the window. No, Alistair, they have to walk into the trap themselves. They have to believe they're winning right up until the second the door slams shut. Alistair looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. You're a colder man than I thought, Elijah Vance. They broke my heart, Alistair, I said. That makes you cold, or it makes you dead. I chose cold. All right then, he said. It's time to make the call. I'll need you to be completely silent. They know my voice, but they don't know my other voice. I didn't know what that meant. He had his secretary track down the motel's main number and then the room. He put the phone on speaker. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, a voice answered. It wasn't a hello. It was a broken, terrified whisper. Hello, hello. Who is this? It was Chloe, my daughter. Her voice was raw, like she had been screaming, or crying, or both. My hand started to shake. I gripped the arm of the chair. Alistair leaned toward the phone, and his entire demeanor changed. His sharp legal voice was gone. In its place was a warm, concerned, almost fatherly tone. Chloe Vance, is that you? Thank God I've been trying to reach you. Alistair, her voice was confused, suspicious. How did you get this number? I could hear Brad yelling in the background. Who is it? Who's calling? Is it one of them? Give me the phone. Alistair, Chloe said, her voice dropping. What do you want? Haven't you and my father done enough? My dear, please, Alistair said, his voice full of fake sympathy. That's why I'm calling. Your father, Eli, he's just devastated. I almost choked. He hasn't slept, Alistair continued, painting a beautiful picture. He's beside himself with guilt. He feels he overreacted at the wedding. He's a proud man, you know, and he was hurt, but he's your father, Chloe. He loves you. There was a silence on the other end. I could hear Brad stop yelling, listening now. What do you mean? Chloe asked, her voice cautious. A little bit of hope creeping in. I mean, Alistair said that he wants to make this right. He's terrified of your lawsuit. The threat of being called incompetent, it broke him. He's an old man, Chloe. He just wants peace. I sat there, my face a mask of stone, a confused old fool. He's authorized me, Alistair said, lowering his voice, to negotiate, to arrange a settlement, to avoid a public messy court battle that would hurt the family. A settlement, Chloe whispered. I could hear the greed in her voice. It was like a bell. Yes, Alistair said. He's willing to discuss a significant disbursement from the trust, a gesture of goodwill, a peace offering, if you and Mr. Covington would be willing to meet, to talk, as a family. How much? It wasn't Chloe, it was Brad. He'd snatched the phone. His voice was no longer yelling. It was sharp, calculating. The con man was back. Brad, Alistair said, pretending to be surprised. Ah, Mr. Covington. Good. I'm glad you're both there. Cut the crap, Hayes, Brad snapped. How much is the old man offering to make this go away? That, sir, is a discussion for an in-person meeting, Alistair said, all professional dignity. Mr. Vance is prepared to be very reasonable. But he's an old-fashioned man. He wants to do this face-to-face. He wants to apologize, and he wants you to sign an agreement that this whole unfortunate incompetence lawsuit will be dropped. Another silence. I could hear them whispering on the other end. It's a trap, Chloe whispered. He's lying, Brad hissed back. He's not lying. He's scared. The old fool is running scared. We got him. I told you he'd break. Brad came back on the line, his voice suddenly smooth again, full of that old oily charm. Mr. Hayes, Alistair, we're devastated by this whole situation as well. We never wanted to sue. It was a last resort. Of course we can meet. We want peace. We want to heal the family. That's all we've ever wanted. Liar. Wonderful, Alistair said. Mr. Vance will be so relieved. Can you be at my office tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. sharp? We can sign the papers and put all this ugliness behind us. 10 a.m., Brad said. We'll be there. He hung up. Alistair leaned back in his chair. He clicked off the speakerphone. The silence in the office was deafening. They took the bait, Eli, he said. I just nodded, my jaw tight. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. They think I'm scared, I whispered. Yes, Alistair said. They think I'm broken. Yes. They think, I said, watching a small mail truck make its way down the street far below, that they've won. Yes, Eli, they do. I turned around. Good. Then they're exactly where Rosie wanted them. The trap was set. Now all we had to do was wait for the rats to arrive. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. The next morning at 9:50 a.m., I was sitting in Alistair Hayes's largest conference room. The room was on the 30th floor, all glass overlooking the harbor. The table was a single piece of dark polished wood so long you could land a small plane on it. I was sitting at the head of the table. To my right sat Alistair, looking like a judge, a thick stack of folders in front of him. To my left sat Marcus Cole, the investigator, quiet as a shadow, a slim laptop open before him. And next to him sat a woman I had never met. Her name was Karen Covington. She was a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes but a strong jaw. She had driven up from Richmond, Virginia after one phone call from Marcus Cole. She wore a simple blue dress and clutched her purse in her lap like a shield. She looked nervous, but she also looked angry. She had been lied to just as I had. I sat there in my old gray suit, the one I'd been thrown out of the wedding in. I wore it on purpose. I wanted them to see the mailman they thought they'd beaten. I was calm. I was still. I was just waiting. At exactly 10 o'clock, the heavy glass doors to the conference room opened, and they walked in. Chloe and Brad. They were glowing. They thought they had won. Brad was wearing his best suit, a sharp navy blue one. His hair was slicked back. He had that $1,000,000 smile plastered on his face, the one he used on his investors. He looked confident, arrogant. He looked like a man who was about to collect a check. Chloe was beside him, clinging to his arm. She was wearing a bright red dress, her hair and makeup perfect. She looked like the bride who had finally gotten her way. She saw me sitting at the end of the table and gave me a small, condescending smile. A smile of pity, as if to say, "It's okay, old man. You did the right thing. You caved." They walked into the room, their steps full of swagger. "Alistair, Eli," Brad started, his voice booming. "Thank you for arranging this. I'm glad we can put this unpleasantness behind us like a real family." They hadn't even looked at the other people in the room. They only saw me and Alistair. They only saw the money. "Please have a seat," Alistair said, his voice flat. He gestured to the two empty chairs directly across from us. They sat down, still smiling, still confident. Chloe started to open her purse. "I'm so glad you're being reasonable, Dad. Once we sign—" "Shut up, Chloe," Brad whispered, his smile still fixed, but his eyes were hard. "Let the lawyers handle it." He looked at Alistair. "So, Alistair, you have the paperwork, the settlement." Alistair didn't answer. He just nodded slowly toward the other side of the table. "Before we begin, Mr. Covington, there are two other parties here I'd like to introduce. This is Mr. Marcus Cole, a forensic investigator." Brad's smile faltered. Just a little. His eyes darted to Cole. "Investigator, what for? I thought this was a family meeting." "And this," Alistair continued, gesturing to the woman with the tired eyes, "is Mrs. Karen Covington." Chloe just looked at her, confused. "Who Covington is she?" "A cousin." "But Brad—" Brad froze. I watched him. The blood drained from his face. All that slick, polished arrogance, it just evaporated. It vanished. He went from a wolf to a trapped rabbit in a single heartbeat. He stared at Karen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His $1,000,000 smile was gone, replaced by a gray mask of pure abject terror. He knew. Karen Covington just looked back at him. She didn't say a word. She just stared. Her gaze was full of 5 years of lies and betrayal. Chloe was looking back and forth, the smile still frozen on her face, not understanding the shift in the room. Brad, what's wrong? Who is this? Why are you looking at her like that?" Brad couldn't speak. He was stammering. Kate, Karen," he whispered. His voice was a dry croak. What are you doing here?" And that's when the woman with the tired eyes finally spoke. She looked at Chloe. Her voice was steady, calm. He told you I was a cousin or an old friend." She turned her gaze back to Brad, a gaze so cold it could freeze fire. "I'm not his cousin," she said, her voice clear and strong, filling the silent room. "I'm his wife." I watched Chloe. Her head snapped toward Brad. What did she say?" "Brad," Chloe asked, her voice rising. "What is she talking about?" Brad was trying to stand up, knocking his chair over. This is a lie. This is a setup. You... Karen Covington didn't raise her voice. She just reached into her purse, the one she'd been clutching like a shield, and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the original piece of paper. She slid it across the table. I'm Karen Sullivan Covington, she said, her voice shaking but full of steel. From Richmond, Virginia, and I have been legally married to this monster for 5 years. Chloe looked at the paper. She looked at Brad. She looked back at me. And I saw it. The exact moment. The realization. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was horror. Brad, she whispered. She's lying, right? Tell me she's lying. You told me you were divorced. You told me she died in a car crash. Died. He had told my daughter his wife was dead. Karen let out a sound. It was half a laugh, half a sob. Died. Oh no, honey, I'm not dead. I've just been in Richmond waiting for the child support checks that never came. Waiting for the husband who said he was on a business trip for the last 6 months. Chloe just stared at the marriage certificate. Then she looked at Brad. Brad, she said again, her voice just a tiny broken sound. And then she just crumpled. She didn't faint. She just collapsed. She put her head in her hands right there at that polished table in her expensive red dress, and she began to sob. Not the angry crocodile tears from my living room. These were the real thing. The ugly, soul-shattering sobs of a woman whose entire world had just been detonated in front of her. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old, and I just watched my daughter break. She wasn't crying like she did in my living room full of anger and entitlement. This was a different sound. This was the sound of a foundation cracking. It was the ugly, raw, guttural sound of a person who just realized the floor they were standing on wasn't real. Brad was frozen pale as ash, staring at Karen. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. In a way he had. The ghost of the life he thought he'd buried in Virginia. You told me she was dead, Chloe wailed, lifting her head from her hands. Her face was a mess of smeared makeup and pure, unfiltered shock. You told me she died in a car crash. Karen Covington flinched. He what? She gasped. Brad finally found his voice. It wasn't the smooth, confident boom he'd used at the wedding. It was a panicked snarl. This is a trick. This is entrapment. You can't be here, he yelled at Karen. You have no right. I have every right. Karen shot back, her voice shaking but finding its steel. I am his wife, you stupid girl. While he was buying you silk dresses, he was bouncing child support checks. This is slander, Brad shouted, scrambling back from the table. I'll sue all of you. You old man. He pointed at me. You did this? This is your fault. He was right. It was my fault. I had set the stage, and now it was time for the main act. Alistair Hayes stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He just stood, and the energy in the room bent toward him. He was tall, sharp in his dark suit. He looked like a preacher, but he was here to collect souls, not save them. Please, Mr. Covington. Sit down, Alistair said. His voice was calm, but it wasn't a request. I'm not sitting anywhere, Brad yelled, heading for the door. I'm calling my lawyer. I wouldn't, Alistair said, his voice stopping Brad cold, because the men you need to talk to are already on their way. Brad froze his hand on the door handle. You came here today, Alistair continued, walking slowly along the side of the long table, believing you were going to negotiate a settlement from a confused old man. He looked at me, then back at them. You thought you were the wolves. You thought my friend Eli, a retired postman, was the sheep. He smiled. It was a terrible smile. You were mistaken. Alistair walked to the head of the table. Welcome, both of you. We are indeed here to negotiate, but not about the trust. We're here to discuss the terms of your surrender. I watched Alistair pick up the first thickest folder. He didn't open it. He just let it drop onto the polished table. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. Let's start with you, Mr. Covington, or whatever your name is. Exhibit A, Covington Capital Partners. Brad's eyes widened. My colleague, Mr. Cole, Alistair said, nodding at Marcus, is a forensic investigator, and he finds your business practices fascinating. He discovered that Covington Capital is nothing but a mail drop service in Wilmington, Delaware. That's standard practice, Brad stammered. Is it, Alistair continued, is it also standard practice to owe your current investors $1.2 million? Is it standard practice to use money from new investors to pay off the old ones? The legal term for that, Mr. Covington, is a Ponzi scheme. It carries a federal sentence of 20 years. Alistair slid the heavy folder down the table. It spun and stopped right in front of Brad. Here is a complete list of your investors, the ones you were trying to impress at the wedding. We've already spoken to 3 of them. They are very eager to cooperate with the district attorney. Brad looked at the folder like it was a snake. He was trapped. Alistair didn't wait for a reply. He picked up the second slimmer folder. Exhibit B, Alistair said. Your complicated personal life. He looked at Karen. Mrs. Covington, my deepest apologies for what you've endured. We have confirmed you are the legal and binding wife of this man married 5 years ago in Richmond, Virginia. Is that correct? Karen Covington, her hands shaking, just nodded. Yes, that is correct. Alistair turned to Chloe. My daughter. She had stopped sobbing. She was just staring pale, looking at Brad as if she'd never seen him before. Which, Alistair continued, his voice heavy with contempt, makes your wedding 2 days ago a criminal offense. Bigamy, Mr. Covington. That's another 5 years. It seems you've been a very, very busy man. Brad sank into his chair. He was broken. He was done. But Alistair wasn't finished, because this wasn't just about Brad. And now, Alistair said, his voice softening into something even more dangerous. We come to you, Chloe. Chloe's head snapped up. Me, I didn't know. He lied to me. He told me she was dead. I'm the victim here. The victim, Alistair repeated. That's an interesting word. He looked at Marcus Cole. Mr. Cole, the final file, if you please. Cole didn't move. He just tapped his laptop. The large screen on the conference room wall flickered to life. No, Chloe whispered. What is this? Exhibit C, Alistair said. The cloud. People think they erase things. They never really do. An email appeared on the screen. An email from her, dated 2.5 years ago. Please, no, Chloe begged, scrambling to her feet. Alistair read it aloud. His voice was cold, dispassionate. To Brad C. Subject the old man. Chloe froze. Alistair read, My mother left a huge trust fund, but my father, this conservative old mailman, he controls everything. He's very gullible. He still thinks I'm his little girl. He trusts me completely. He's the lock on the box, Brad, and you're the key. I just sat there, hearing the words, hearing them read aloud in this sterile room. It was worse than reading them myself. It was my own daughter's voice planning my execution. Brad, Chloe screamed, rounding on him. You saved those. You promised you'd delete them. Brad the con man just looked at her with dead eyes. You think I'd trust you? And the reply? Alistair continued, relentless. From Mr. Covington. Leave the old man to me. I'll make him believe I love you. If he approves $100,000 for the wedding, we can use that as leverage. We'll use it to sue him for the rest. We'll claim he's unfit. We'll take everything. Alistair turned off the screen. The room plunged back into silence, broken only by Chloe's ragged breathing. Alistair looked at Chloe. You weren't a victim, Ms. Vance. You were his partner. You weren't just fooled by a con man. You hired him. You brought this wolf into your father's house. You aimed him at the man who raised you, who loved you. Brad started to laugh, a low, gurgling, horrible sound. That's right. Tell him, Alistair, she's worse than I am. She knew about Karen. She helped me hide it. Liar, Chloe shrieked, launching herself across the table at him. You liar. It was your idea. Stop, Alistair roared, and they both froze. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. The room was electric with hatred. Chloe and Brad were frozen, staring at each other. The masks were gone. This wasn't a family argument. This was two snakes in a pit, suddenly realizing there was only one way out. Liar! Chloe shrieked again, her voice raw. It was all you. You pushed me. You told me he was a nobody. You told me it was the only way. Me. Brad laughed. It was a high, ugly sound full of venom. I didn't make you write those emails, you greedy little... You were looking for a way out long before I came along. You just needed someone to do the dirty work. Shut up, both of you, Alistair commanded, but I held up my hand. No, Alistair. Let them talk. I want to hear this. I looked at Brad. So, that's it? You conned her. You used her. Brad just sneered at me, his confidence returning now that he thought he could pin it all on Chloe. She was easy. The easiest mark I ever had. She wanted to believe I was some big shot. She hated being a mailman's daughter. She was embarrassed by you long before I ever showed up. Chloe let out a sob. That's not true. I love my father. Oh, please, Brad spat. You loved his money, or your mother's money. You just couldn't wait for him to die so you could get your hands on it. And you, Brad? I asked, my voice quiet. You were just along for the ride. You didn't want the money. I wanted what I was owed, he said. For 2 years of playing the devoted fiancé, of listening to your boring stories about the post office, you're damn right I earned it. He looked at Chloe with pure contempt. And I would have gotten away with it if I hadn't tied myself to this emotional, stupid amateur. He thought he was winning. He thought he had successfully painted Chloe as the mastermind, the weak link. He thought he could separate himself from her, maybe cut a deal. I looked at Alistair. He nodded. Then I looked at Marcus Cole, the investigator. He hadn't moved. He just sat there watching, listening. Mr. Cole, I said, my voice cutting through their argument, you said you had one more thing. Brad and Chloe both froze. They looked at Cole. I do, Cole said. He hadn't been on the payroll for the last 24 hours just to sit pretty. He had been digging. Mr. Covington, you're right. Your partner, Ms. Vance. She is an amateur, but she's not stupid, and she's certainly not loyal. What are you talking about? Brad snapped. We were in this together. Were you? Cole asked. He pressed a key on his laptop. It wasn't an email. It was an audio file. This, Cole explained, is a recording of a phone call Ms. Vance made from the motel last night, after you two had that disagreement about Mr. Vance's offer. Chloe's face went white. She knew exactly what this was. Who did you call Chloe? Brad whispered, his eyes narrowing, and then we heard her voice. Her real voice. Not the crying, terrified victim. Not the angry, cornered animal. This was a voice I had never heard before. It was cold, arrogant, and amused. We heard her laughing. No, girl, I'm fine, Chloe's voice said, echoing from the speakers. No, it's not over. The old man he just ruined the party. He thinks he's won. He thinks he's so smart cutting off the check. We heard her take a drag from a cigarette. He thinks he's won, she repeated, but he just handed me everything, don't you get it? He just proved to the world that he's vindictive. He's unstable. It's perfect for the incompetence lawsuit. Brad is just a pawn. I'm playing the long game. Brad stood up slowly. He wasn't breathing. What? He whispered. Chloe's recorded voice continued, oblivious, bragging to her friend. Of course Brad thinks he's in charge. He's an idiot, a useful idiot, but still an idiot. He actually thinks I'd stay with him. Please. A broke bigamist who wants to be tied to that. The man told me his wife was dead. She laughed again. No, I'll play the part of the poor, manipulated wife. I'll let him take the fall for the Ponzi thing. And when the old man dies, and he will die soon, the trust comes to me. All of it. And Brad, he'll be in jail and I'll be rich. You don't get millions, girl, by being loyal. You get it by being smart. The recording stopped. The silence in the room was absolute. Karen Covington was staring at Chloe, her mouth open in pure disgust. Alistair just looked at his notes. I looked at Brad. He was shaking. His face was a mask of disbelief, a horrifying, slow-dawning comprehension. The con man had just been conned. He turned his head very, very slowly. He looked at Chloe. She was pressed against the back of her chair, her face as white as her wedding dress, her eyes wide with terror. Brad, she whispered. Brad, I didn't mean it. I was just angry. He looked at her. He saw her for the first time. He didn't see a partner. He didn't see a victim. He saw the person who was going to let him rot in jail while she took everything. "You," he whispered. His voice was choked, unrecognizable. You were going to use me. You were going to... You were going to throw me away. No, Brad, listen to me. It was just talk." He wasn't listening. He was just staring at her, his mind broken. And then he lunged. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a push. He launched himself across that billion-dollar table. His hands outstretched his face, a mask of pure murderous rage. "You lying!" He grabbed her by the throat. Chloe screamed a choked, gurgling sound. They went down chairs, crashing, papers flying. "He's killing her!" Karen screamed. Marcus Cole was on his feet in an instant, but Alistair was faster. Alistair didn't move toward them. He moved to the intercom on the wall. He pressed the button. "Gentlemen," Alistair said, his voice perfectly calm over the sounds of Chloe screaming and Brad roaring. "I think it's time. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old." The chaos exploded. Brad was roaring a deep animal sound of pure rage, his hands locked around Chloe's throat. They had crashed backwards off her chair and were a tangle of expensive clothes and flailing limbs on Alistair's thick carpet. Chloe was screaming a high, choked, gurgling sound. Her hands were clawing at his face, her perfect nails drawing blood. "Get him off me," she choked out. Karen Covington was pressed against the wall, her hand over her mouth, screaming. Marcus Cole, the investigator, was already moving, pulling his phone out, dialing 911. "He's assaulting her," he yelled, but Alistair Hayes didn't move toward them. He was a statue of perfect calm. He simply pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice perfectly level, cutting through the screams. "I believe it's time." The heavy glass doors of the conference room swung open, but it wasn't just one person. It was two men in dark suits walking in with a heavy, purposeful tread. They weren't lawyers. They were detectives. Baltimore police. "What the hell?" Brad roared, looking up from Chloe, his hands still on her neck. "Bradley Covington," the taller detective said, his voice booming in the suddenly quiet room. He didn't seem surprised at all to see a man in a tuxedo strangling a woman in a red dress on the floor of a law office. "Take your hands off the lady." Brad froze. He looked from the detectives to Alistair to me. He finally understood. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a family argument. This was a trap. He scrambled off Chloe, his hands up. "Officers, thank God. This is a private matter. This woman," he pointed at Karen, "she's harassing us," and he pointing at me. "He's been threatening my wife." The detective just looked at him with dead, tired eyes. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The click, click, click of the ratchet was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. "Bradley T. Covington," the detective said, yanking Brad's hands behind his back. "You are under arrest for felony fraud, operating a Ponzi scheme, and bigamy." "You can't," Brad yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "You have no proof. This is slander. This is..." "We have," the detective said, "a full confession from 3 of your investors. We have a signed statement from your legal wife, Mrs. Karen Covington, and we have a hard drive from Mr. Cole here with 3 years of your encrypted emails. I think we have plenty of proof." Brad's legs just gave out. The detective had to hold him up as he cuffed him. The con man, the slick, smooth talker, was gone. He was just a pathetic, terrified, middle-aged man in a wrinkled suit. Chloe was still on the floor, gasping, holding her throat. Her red dress was torn. She was staring at the scene, her eyes wide with a horror that was just beginning to dawn. She wasn't a partner in a clever scheme. She was a co-conspirator in a federal crime. The second detective, a woman, walked over to her. She didn't offer a hand. She just looked down. "Ms. Chloe Vance?" the detective asked. Chloe just nodded, trembling. "You need to come with us. We have some questions for you regarding your involvement in a conspiracy to commit fraud and your role in defrauding the Rosalind Vance Trust." No, Chloe whispered. I'm a victim. He lied to me. He lied to all of us. Dad." She turned to me. Her eyes were wild. She scrambled to her feet and rushed toward me, stumbling. "Dad, tell them it's not true. Tell them he did it. He fooled me. He fooled all of us." She grabbed the front of my old gray suit, her knuckles white. "Dad, please, you can't let them do this to me. You can't. I'm your daughter." Her voice was a desperate, pleading shriek. All the arrogance was gone. All the condescension. All the shame she had felt for me was gone. Now there was just pure, raw terror. She was 10 years old again, scared of the dark, begging me to make the monsters go away. But this time she was the monster. I looked down at her. I saw her face, the face I had loved for 40 years, the face of the little girl who had given me that world's greatest dad mug. And I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold, empty stillness. The place where my heart had been for her. It was just a hole, just scar tissue. I gently, firmly took her hands off my suit jacket. I held her wrists. I looked her dead in the eye. "I can't help you, Chloe," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through her sobs. "Why?" she wept. "Why are you doing this? I'm your family. I'm your blood." "No," I said, and my voice was as cold and hard as the marble on the hotel floor. "You're not. Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't plot." I let go of her hands. "You are a beneficiary," I said, "in breach of contract." I looked at Alistair. He nodded. I looked at the detective. She is a violation of Clause 12B. Chloe just stared at me, her mouth open, not understanding. She didn't understand the words. She just understood the tone, the finality. The detective gently took her arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." "No, Daddy," she screamed as they started to pull her away. They took Brad out first, him yelling about his lawyer. Then they led Chloe out. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was just limp, defeated. As they passed me, she looked at me one last time. Her eyes were empty. She had finally understood. It was over. "You did this," she whispered, her voice dead. You killed me." "No, Chloe," I said as the door clicked shut behind her. I turned and looked at the picture of Rosalind that Alistair had placed on his desk. "You killed yourself. I just signed the death certificate." My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. The trials when they came weren't like they are on television. There was no grand dramatic showdown. There were no surprise witnesses. It was just cold. It was the cold, quiet machinery of justice grinding down the lies that Brad and Chloe had built. Brad went first. He had been loud and arrogant in my living room, but in that federal courtroom he was a different man. He was small. He was pathetic. Marcus Cole and Alistair had done their work too well. The evidence was not a trickle. It was a flood. The list of investors he had defrauded, the ones from the wedding they lined up to testify. The paper trail from his Ponzi scheme was a mile long. And then there was Karen Covington, his legal wife. When she took the stand, she didn't cry. She was just factual. She presented the marriage certificate. She presented the bounced child support checks. She presented the text messages where he told her he was on a big deal in Asia, while he was in fact planning a wedding to my daughter in Baltimore. Brad didn't even let it get to a jury. On the second day, his lawyer, a man who looked as exhausted as Brad, looked terrified, stood up. They had been offered a deal. Alistair and I sat in the back row. We just watched. Brad stood before the judge, his hands clasped behind his back. The arrogance was gone. The $1 million smile was gone. He looked like what he was, a failed con man at the end of his rope. He pleaded guilty. He pleaded guilty to wire fraud. He pleaded guilty to operating an unlicensed securities scheme. And he pleaded guilty to bigamy. He sold out everyone he could, offered up names and dates, anything to shave a few years off his sentence. But the judge, she was a woman who looked a lot like my Rosie. She had that same look in her eye, the look that sees right through you. She wasn't impressed. She gave him 15 years. 15 years in a federal penitentiary. When they let him away, he didn't look at Chloe. He didn't look at me. He just looked at the floor. And just like that, the wolf who had come into my house, the man who had called me a gatekeeper, he was gone. As for Karen, the court awarded her any and all of Brad's remaining assets. It wasn't much. A few $1,000s in a frozen account and a car he had hidden. It wasn't justice for 5 years of lies, but it was her money now, not his. She walked out of that courtroom and drove back to Virginia a free woman. And that just left Chloe. This was the part I had dreaded. This was the part that kept me awake at night staring at the ceiling in my little house. Alistair came to see me the following week. "Eli," he said, sitting at my kitchen table, the one he'd sat at 100 times before. "The district attorney has a Loctite case against her. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Those emails, the ones she wrote, they're the definition of premeditation. They're offering her a plea, Eli. 5 years, minimum. If she fights it and loses with her lack of remorse, the judge will give her 10. 10 years. My daughter, my Chloe bug. In a prison cell for 10 years. I thought I would feel something. Satisfaction. Justice. But I just felt tired. I just felt old. I thought about Rosie's face. Protect her, Eli. Protect her from herself. Would sending her to prison protect her? Or would it just destroy her? "I can't do it, Alistair," I whispered. "What?" he said, leaning in. "What do you mean you can't, Eli? She is a criminal. She conspired to strip you of everything." "I know," I said, my voice thick. "I know what she is. But I can't be the one to put her in that cell. I can't take the stand. I can't be the man who testifies against his own child. Rosie wouldn't want that." Alistair was quiet for a long time. He rubbed his temples. "So what then?" he finally said. "You just let her go. After all this, after she plotted to call you incompetent, after she helped that monster." I looked at the empty picture frame on my kitchen table, the one that used to hold Rosie's picture before it shattered. "No," I said. "I won't let her go, but I won't send her to prison." I looked at Alistair. I had an idea. A final act. "Make them an offer," I said. "You go to the DA, you go to her lawyer, you tell them, 'I, Elijah Vance, I will not take the stand. I will not testify. I will not provide my personal damning testimony about her conspiracy.' If she signs what Eli signs everything away," I said. "I want her to legally, permanently, and irrevocably sign away any and all rights to the Rosalind Vance Trust. I want her to sign a document that states she is of sound mind, that she has read the will, that she understands Clause 12b, and that she accepts her disinheritance. Completely. No appeals. No future lawsuits." Alistair looked at me, his eyes wide. "Eli, that's brutal. You're giving her a choice: prison or poverty. Real poverty. Forever." "She chose this," I said. "She chose this when she decided I was just a gullible old mailman. She can have her freedom, but she can't have her mother's money." The signing wasn't in a courtroom. It was in a sterile gray conference room in her lawyer's office. I was there. Alistair was there. Chloe was there with her public defender. She looked terrible. She was thin pale, her eyes were dead. The fire, the arrogance, the greed, it was all gone. She just looked empty. Her lawyer explained the document. "Ms. Vance, this is a general release. You sign this. You acknowledge the breach of the trust. You forfeit any and all claims to the Rosalind Vance Trust now and forever. In exchange, your father agrees not to provide testimony in the state's case against you. The DA has agreed based on this to drop the conspiracy charges." He looked at her. "You sign this, Chloe, and you walk away. You don't go to jail." She didn't look at him. She looked at me. Her voice was a dry rasp. "So, after all this, you still win. You still get to control me." I shook my head. "This isn't control, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet. "This is a consequence. This is the last gift I will ever give you. It's the gift of your freedom. It's the one thing you can't buy." I pushed the document across the table. "But it costs you," I said. "It costs you everything else." She looked at the paper. She looked at me. She looked at her lawyer, who just nodded. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking. I watched her sign her name, the same name I taught her to write. Chloe R. Vance. The sound of the pen scratching on the paper was the only sound in the room. It was done. She was free. and she was finally officially disinherited. She stood up. She didn't cry, she didn't yell, she just walked out of the room, a free woman with absolutely nothing, not even a father. Alistair gathered the papers. "It's over, Eli." I just nodded. I watched her walk down the hallway until she was gone. I had kept my promise. I had protected Rosie's legacy. I had saved it from my daughter. But I felt no victory. I just felt the end. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. A month passed. The charges against Chloe were dropped. Brad Covington was a name I only saw in the crime section of the newspaper awaiting his sentencing. The noise, it had finally stopped. I was in my kitchen making a simple lunch when Alistair called. He didn't call my house phone anymore. He called my cell. "Eli," he said. His voice was tired. "She called the office. Chloe, she's asking to see you." My hand tightened on the counter. "What for? What more could she possibly want?" "I don't know, Eli," he said. She just said, please. She's working at a diner, a place called the Blue Moon Cafe down by the shipyard. The Blue Moon. I knew that place. It was a 24-hour joint for dock workers and truck drivers, a place you went when you had nowhere else to go. "She's working?" I asked. That was new. "Apparently so," Alistair said. She sounded different, Eli. Not angry, just broken. "You don't have to go. You don't owe her anything." "No," I said, looking at Rosie's picture now in a new simple wooden frame on the table. "I know, but I have to. Just once. I have to. I have to see." I took the bus. I didn't take a taxi. I wanted to. I don't know. I wanted to feel the city again. The real one. The one I'd walked for 40 years. The Blue Moon Cafe was exactly as I remembered. The windows were steamy, the sign was buzzing, and it smelled like old coffee and fried onions. I walked in. The bell over the door chimed. And I saw her. She was behind the counter wiping it down. She wore a stained pale blue uniform that was too big for her. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun under a hairnet. Her perfect manicured nails were gone, replaced by hands that were red and raw. She wasn't wearing a single piece of jewelry. She looked up when the bell rang. She saw me. She just froze. Her face was thin, pale. The fire, the arrogance, the entitled fury. It was all gone. She just looked empty. Like a house that had been cleared out. "Dad," she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just slid into one of the cracked vinyl booths by the window. She put the rag down slowly and walked over. Her movements were slow, tired. Not the vibrant, quick energy she used to have. She just looked heavy. She sat down across from me. We just looked at each other for a long time. The only sound was the clatter of plates from the kitchen and the low hum of the coffee machine. "So," she finally said. Her voice was a rasp. "You came." "I came," I said. "Come to see what I've become, to gloat." She tried to make it sound angry, but there was no strength behind it. It was just sad. "I came to see my daughter," I said. She let out a dry, bitter laugh. "You don't have a daughter, Dad. You made sure of that. You took everything." I looked at her, really looked at her. "I didn't take anything from you, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I couldn't, because you never had any of it. Not really." She frowned. "What are you talking about? The trust, the money, my inheritance." "That wasn't your inheritance, Chloe. That was your mother's legacy. An inheritance is something you get. A legacy is something you have to earn. You have to be worthy of it. I gave you 40 years of my life. I gave you my unconditional love. I gave you every chance in the world to be the woman your mother wanted you to be." I leaned forward. "You had all that, Chloe. You had my love. You had your mother's memory. That was the real inheritance. And you are the one who threw it away. You threw it away for a con man in a fancy suit and the promise of money you were too lazy to earn." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She just stared at me. "So what now?" she whispered. Her voice was broken. I have nothing. I'm working 60 hours a week at this dump, just to pay rent on a room I'm sharing. I have no friends. My parents-in-law, they won't even speak to me. I have nothing. No, I said. You're wrong. She looked up confused. You have this, I said, motioning to the cafe to her uniform. You have a job. You're earning your own way. For the first time in your entire life. You're not living off my work or your mother's legacy. You're standing on your own. She stared at me, not understanding. I pulled out my old leather wallet, the same one I'd had for 20 years. I took out a $20 bill. I laid it on the table. I'll have a coffee, I said. And a piece of that apple pie. She looked at the $20. Then she looked at me. I'm not your waitress, Dad. Aren't you? I asked gently. You're working here, aren't you? A tear finally escaped and ran down her cheek. She slowly nodded. Then you're a working woman, Chloe, just like I was a working man. I pushed the $20 bill across the table. Your mother, she always worried the money would make you weak. She was right. It did. But maybe losing it, maybe this, will finally make you strong. She looked at the money. She looked at me. The anger, the entitlement, it was gone. She just looked lost. So what do I do? She whispered. Just this. For the rest of my life. I stood up. I put my hand on the cracked vinyl of the booth. You start over, I said. I don't know how, she cried. Yes, you do, I said. You do exactly what I did 50 years ago. You get up, you put on your uniform, you go to work, you pay your rent, you earn your own dignity. You begin. I looked at her one last time. My daughter, my Chloe bug. A 40-year-old woman finally being forced to grow up. It's a long, hard road, Chloe, I said. But it's the only one that's real, I know. I walked it my whole life. I turned and walked toward the door. My coffee was still untouched. The pie was still in the display case. Dad, her voice was small. I stopped my hand on the door, but I didn't turn around. Where are you going? I looked through the glass at the street, at the buses, at the people walking, at the real world. Home, I said. I'm going home. I pushed the door open. The little bell chimed, and I walked out into the sunlight, leaving her there with the $20 bill and the first honest choice of her entire life. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. It's been 2 months since I watched my daughter sign her life away. 2 months since I've seen her. I hear she's still working at that diner. I hear she's paying her own rent. That's all I know. Today, Alistair Hayes picked me up in his black, quiet car. The kind that smells like new leather and old money. We didn't drive downtown. We drove to my neighborhood, West Baltimore. We parked on the corner of Franklin and Monroe, the street I used to walk as a mailman. The street I know like the back of my hand. We got out and stood in front of it, the building. It was an old community center. Or, it used to be. Now it was just a carcass. The windows were boarded up with plywood. The red bricks were covered in graffiti. The big double doors were chained and padlocked. A sign hanging by one hinge read, West Baltimore, Sent. The rest was gone. It was a picture of decay, a forgotten place for forgotten people. Well, Alistair said, adjusting his expensive suit. He looked out of place here. He looked like a hawk in a sparrow's nest. There it is. I see it, I said. Alistair looked at a legal document in his hand. A final closing statement. It's done, Eli. As of 9:05 this morning, the Rosalind Vance Trust as we knew it is officially dissolved. The brokerage accounts have been liquidated. The total assets, $15,422,000, have been transferred in full. He folded the paper and put it in his breast pocket. It all belongs to them now. The West Baltimore Community Center Foundation, all of it. He looked at the broken graffiti-covered building. $15 million for this. I still think she was crazy, Eli. You could have fought it. We could have contested. I didn't answer him. I just looked at the building. He saw decay. He saw a bad investment. He saw a waste. I saw my whole life. I saw 1985. I was walking this very route, my mailbag heavy on my shoulder. And I saw Rosalind, my Rosie. She wasn't in a fancy dress. She was in jeans and an old t-shirt, her hair tied up in a scarf, and she had a paintbrush in her hand. She was here on these steps painting a mural with a dozen little kids from the neighborhood. This place was her first love. Long before the lawyers, long before the trust, this was her home. I remember a conversation. We were sitting right there on those steps sharing a sandwich from my lunchbox. She was 25 years old and full of fire. "If we ever make it, Eli," she said, wiping paint off her nose. "I mean really make it. We have to remember this. We have to come back. We can't just leave them behind." I hadn't understood it then. And when she wrote the will, I thought the community center was just a backup plan, a threat to hold over Chloe. Be good or the money goes to charity. But standing here in front of this broken building, I finally understood. I finally saw the truth. I was the backup plan. Chloe was the backup plan. This was always her real child. This was her true legacy. Chloe wasn't a test for me. I was a test for Chloe. Rosie had given her daughter 40 years to become a person worthy of this legacy. 40 years to learn, to see the world the way her mother did. And in the end, my daughter failed the test. I looked at the boarded-up windows. Alistair was right. It was a ruin. But I'm a postman. I don't see ruins. I see foundations. I don't see broken windows. I see a library. I see a place where kids can come after school and do their homework, a place where they're safe. I don't see graffiti. I see an art room, a music room, a place for that fire I saw in Rosie to catch in a new generation. I looked at the chained-up doors. I see a computer lab, a job training center, a place where old men like me, old retired mailmen and mechanics and carpenters can come and teach these kids a trade, teach them how to fix things, how to build things, how to play chess. I thought about that $100,000 wedding, that grand cold ballroom, all that money for nothing, for one night of fake smiles and imported flowers. That was decay. That was a waste. This was a seed. This was an investment. This was substance. "Alistair," I said, my voice quiet. "Yeah, Eli." "You're wrong," I said. "She wasn't crazy. She was a genius." Alistair looked at me confused. "What are you talking about? It's a disaster." "No," I said. "It's a start." I walked up the cracked steps past the weeds and the trash. I put my hand on the cold, heavy chain. "So," Alistair said, walking up beside me. "What now?" "You're a 75-year-old man, Eli. Your daughter is gone. You're free. You don't have to worry about this. You could go to Florida, Arizona, sit on a beach. You've earned it." I thought about that. I thought about sitting. I thought about the sun. I thought about nothing. Just waiting. Waiting for the end. It sounded like a prison. I looked at the padlock on the chain. "You know, Alistair," I said, "I've been a mailman my whole life. I just delivered what other people wrote. I just carried the bag." I turned to him, and for the first time since that night at the wedding, I smiled. A real smile. It felt good. "I'm tired of carrying the bag, Alistair. I think I finally know what I want to do." "And what's that, old friend?" he asked. I pointed at the chained doors. "I'm not retiring," I said. "I just got a new job. I'm the trustee, right? Well, it's time to deliver. Get your phone out, Alistair. Find me a good contractor. We've got work to do." My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. It's been 6 months since I sat in that sterile conference room and watched my daughter's life collapse. 6 months since I made the choice to enforce my wife's will. Today, I'm standing on the corner of Franklin and Monroe right here in West Baltimore, but the building in front of me isn't the one I stood in front of with Alistair Hayes. The boarded-up windows are gone. The graffiti has been sandblasted off the red brick. The chained doors have been replaced with wide, welcoming panels of glass that reflect the morning sun. It doesn't smell like decay anymore. It smells like new lumber, fresh paint, and floor wax. Alistair still thinks Rosalind was a sentimental fool for this. He thought $15 million should have endowed a university chair something with a plaque. But Rosie, she knew better. She didn't want a plaque. She wanted a place. She knew that plaques get forgotten, but a place stays alive. Above the new glass doors there's a sign. Heavy bronze letters bolted right into the brick. It says, "The Rosalind Vance Community Center." I walk inside. It's not the Sagamore Pendry Hotel. It's not a palace of marble and cold silence built to make men like me feel small. It's better. The floors are polished hardwood warm. The walls are painted a bright, clean yellow. And it's not silent. It's loud. I can hear the thump, thump, thump of basketballs on the new gymnasium floor. I can hear the high excited chatter of children from the daycare center we built in the West Wing. I can hear the click-clack-click of keyboards from the computer lab, where a dozen teenagers are working on applications for jobs for colleges, for a future. I'm not retired anymore. A man like me, a postman, he doesn't know how to stop. He just finds a new route. I walk past the front desk, say good morning to Mrs. Gable, who used to live 3 streets over on my old route. She volunteers here now. "Morning, Mr. Eli," she says, her smile bright. "Morning, Eleanor," I say. I'm not wearing my old gray suit. I'm not even wearing my mailman's uniform. I'm wearing a comfortable flannel shirt, old blue jeans, and my work boots. My hands, the ones that carried mail bags for 40 years, the ones that Chloe was so ashamed of. They're useful again. I walk into the main room. It used to be a cavernous, empty space. Now it's the library. Bookshelves line the walls, all of them full. In the corner by the big windows are 3 small chess tables. My station. A young boy is already there waiting for me. He's maybe 12 years old. His name is Jamal. He's smart as a whip, but he's got a temper. He reminds me of how I wish Chloe had been. "You're late, Mr. Eli," he says, not looking up from the board. I chuckle and sit down across from him. The chair is simple wood, solid. A mailman is never late, son. He arrives precisely when he's needed. We start to play. The click of the wooden pieces on the board is a comforting sound. I think about the last 6 months, about the trials, Brad Covington. The con man, he didn't even fight. Faced with Alistair's mountain of evidence, the Ponzi scheme, the bigamy, the wire fraud, he just folded. He took a plea. 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Karen, his real wife, got what little he had left. She sent me a card. It just said, "Thank you." And Chloe, I couldn't do it. When the time came, I couldn't be the one to put my own daughter in a prison cell. Alistair called it weakness. I called it the last thing I could do for the little girl I used to know. I made the deal. I didn't testify. In exchange, she signed the papers. She gave up everything. All rights, all claims forever. The final, legal, irrevocable end. She chose her freedom over her mother's legacy. She's still working at that diner, the Blue Moon. I know because Alistair, he still has Marcus Cole check in just to make sure she's okay. She's paying her own rent. She's alone. She's just a woman now like any other. She sends me letters. They come to my house. They're written on cheap notebook paper. They're full of words. Sorry. Regret. Mistake. I don't read them. I put them in a box. Maybe someday I will, but not today. Today she's just mail I can't deliver. Gotcha. Jamal's voice snaps me back. I look down at the board. He's trapped my night. I'm pinned against the back row. "You're thinking about them again, aren't you, Mr. Eli?" he asks. He's too smart for his own good. I just nod. "Sometimes, son. Sometimes." "You gotta look at the whole board," he says, parroting my own words back to me. "Stop looking at the pieces you lost." I look at this kid, this sharp, brilliant kid who lives 3 blocks from here, who didn't have a place to go after school and who is now teaching me. I think about Brad. He only saw the next move. The 100K, the quick con. He never saw the rest of the board. I think about Chloe. She just wanted to be the queen. She was so desperate to get across the board that she sacrificed every piece that was trying to protect her. And she ended up with nothing. "You're right, Jamal," I say. I look at my trapped knight. Sometimes you gotta sacrifice a piece to win the game. I move my pawn, It's a bad move, and I know it. Jamal's eyes go wide. He sees it. The opening. He takes my knight. Click. He looks at me suspicious. You let me do that. I just smile. A real smile. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't feel empty. A king is nothing without his people, son, I tell him. A piece is only worth what it can do, not what it is. You remember that. He frowns, thinking. He moves his rook. Check. I look up from the board. I look around this room. The computers are humming. Mrs. Gable is reading a story to a group of toddlers in the corner. I can hear the thump, thump, thump of the basketball. I lost a daughter. I lost the girl I walked to school, the girl I taught to ride a bike. That part of me, that part is gone. It's a closed-off room. But I look at this building, these kids, this neighborhood, this is what Rosalind wanted. I didn't just save her money, I saved her dream. I didn't just lose a family, I found a new one, a much bigger one. Checkmate, Jamal says, his voice full of pride. I look down. He's right. He beat me clean. I lean back in my chair and laugh. A real deep laugh. It feels good. It feels like peace. Good game, son, I say, already setting the pieces back up for another round. Good game. My name is Elijah Vance. I am 75 years old. The city of Baltimore is loud in the mornings. I sit here on a simple wooden bench in the middle of what used to be a ruin, and I listen to it. I hear the bounce of a basketball on new asphalt. I hear the high, sharp laughter of children in the daycare. I hear the click-clack of keyboards from the new computer lab. This is the Rosalind Vance Community Center. This is my new mail route. It's been 6 months since I sat in that sterile conference room. 6 months since I watched the life my daughter Chloe thought she was building just disintegrate. Alistair Hayes, my lawyer, my friend, he still thinks I was too hard on her. He's a good man, but he didn't raise her. I did. I think about that a lot. Did I fail her? I'm sitting here watching a 12-year-old kid named Jamal try to beat me at chess. He's smart, he's hungry, he sees the whole board. And I know the answer. Yes, I failed her, long before Brad Covington ever sank his hooks into her. My wife Rosalind, she saw it. She warned me. We were in the kitchen. Chloe was maybe 16. She'd just stormed off, slamming her bedroom door, all because we told her she couldn't have a new car. Rosie was stirring a pot of stew. I'll never forget it. She looked at me, her face tired, and she said, "Eli, you're going to break your back for that girl. And she's not going to love you for it." She said, "You're giving her everything she wants. You're not teaching her what things cost. You're not teaching her to respect the work. One day she's going to look at your sweat, and she's just going to see less. Don't let your love make her weak, Eli. Don't let it make her cruel." I didn't listen. How could I? I loved her too much. I couldn't stand to see her unhappy. I worked the extra shifts for the prom dress. I paid for the college she barely attended. And when she cried about her dream wedding, I signed the check. I signed that $100,000 check, even though my gut screamed that it was wrong. I was still trying to buy her happiness. I was still running down the alley, my hand on her bicycle seat, promising I'd never let her fall. But I was wrong. I see it now. You have to let them fall. If you don't, they never ever learn how to stand on their own. My protection, my love, my silence. It didn't make her strong. It made her weak. It made her entitled. It made her cruel. It made her the kind of person who could look at her own father, the man who gave her everything, and see nothing but a gullible old mailman. She still sends me letters. From that little room she rents in a bad part of town. They come to my house addressed in her familiar handwriting. They're written on cheap notebook paper. They're full of words. Sorry. Regret. Mistake. Please. I don't read them. I put them in a box. An old shoebox in my closet. Maybe someday I will. But not today. Alistair says that's cold. He says that's unforgiving. But it's not. It's just necessary. I'm not doing it to punish her. I'm doing it because I finally learned my lesson. My money, my help. It was a poison to her. It was the drug she was addicted to. And I was her dealer for 40 years. I've cut her off. not out of hate, but because it's the only way she'll ever heal, the only way she'll ever find out who she is without my shadow, without her mother's money. What I did in that diner, leaving that $20 bill, that was the first real act of fatherly love I've shown her in 30 years. It wasn't a handout. It was a message. Get up, go to work, be better. Maybe one day she will. Maybe one day she'll walk through the doors of this community center, not as an heir, but as a volunteer, as a woman who finally understands what her mother was trying to build. Maybe. I hope so. But I'm not waiting by the phone. I'm too busy. I look at Jamal. He's scowling at the chessboard, trying to find a way to trap my bishop. He's a good kid. His mother works 2 jobs. He's got that fire in him, the same fire Rosie had. I think about Brad Covington. He only saw the next move, the 100K, the quick con. He never saw the rest of the board. I think about Chloe. She just wanted to be the queen. She was so desperate to get across the board that she sacrificed every piece that was trying to protect her, and she ended up with nothing. You're not paying attention, Mr. Eli, Jamal says, snapping me out of it. You're thinking about them again. I look at this kid, this sharp, brilliant kid who is now teaching me. You're right, Jamal, I say. I was looking at the pieces I lost. You gotta look at the pieces you still got, he says, parroting my own words back to me. I look around this room. The computers are humming. Mrs. Gable is reading a story to a group of toddlers in the corner. I can hear the thump, thump, thump of the basketball. I lost a daughter. I lost the girl I taught to ride a bike. That part of me, that part is gone. It's a closed-off room. But I look at this building, these kids, this neighborhood, this is what Rosalind wanted. I didn't just save her money, I saved her dream. I didn't just lose a family, I found a new one, a much bigger one. Check, Jamal says, his voice full of pride. I look down. He's got me. He's trapped my king. I lean back in my simple wooden chair and I laugh. A real, deep laugh. It feels good. It feels like peace. Good game, son, I say, already setting the pieces back up for another round. Good game. This story teaches us a hard truth. The deepest betrayals often come from those we've given the most to. But your dignity is not a negotiation. Do not let anyone, not even family, make you feel small for the sacrifices you made. True strength isn't about how much you can endure in silence. It's about knowing exactly when to stop, draw the line, and remind them who you are. Respect must be earned even from your own children. Sometimes the most profound act of love, Silasaim, is letting them face the consequences you can no longer protect them from. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. And what would you have done in my place? I'm always curious to hear what you all think. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.